Chapter 5. Dear Journal, what does it mean to be cursed? What does it truly mean? Does it mean that I've been robbed? Does it mean that I still possess things that have yet to be stolen from me? Have I experienced the worst that fate has to offer? Or am I simply lying in wait for the darkest, cruelest punchline in life yet to come? It's very easy to feel sorry about myself. It's something that I can't help but dwell upon every day. For a while, I've feared that I would let things like this get to my head, that I would resort to doing acts both desperate and pathetic that would only hurt the ghostly shades of friends I pretended to be surrounded by on a regular basis. Then I met souls, amazing and inspiring souls, who each were born with a chance to shine, like I once was. Though they were never magically robbed of their ability to achieve greatness, I soon realized that they too were at a loss to encounter opportunities to surpass their own limits. After all, what is life if not a complex game with both winners and losers, and not enough points to happily placate both? The fact that I'm a pony with no perceivable future cannot be denied. Until I can somehow unlock the magical power of the elegies, the thick black borders of my invisible prison, I cannot hope for anything but a future of oblivion, obscurity, and emptiness. What, though, can be said of those around me? As a matter of fact, ponies have always been cursed since the beginning of time, not by a frigid dome of amnesia, but by a transitive sphere of ignorance that constantly threatens our very dreams and aspirations, from their genius conception to their desperate expression. I, at least, have hope that no pony else seems to have. As soon as I end this curse, I expect to immediately begin existing once again. However, it's been my experience that there are mares and stallions, gentle hearts, all of them, who may never exist, at least not quite as brilliantly as they might desire to, no matter how hard they struggle. What solution do they have to pick from the hat? What silver bullet will slay the beast that consumes their artistry with as much ease as I might slay mine? No, I am not cursed. I am simply less blessed, less polished and shiny than those around me. With time, I have faith that I will enchant that which has struck dead in my life. I will bring shine back to a dull existence. And yet, no matter what progress I may make or not make, I cannot stop hoping, or dreaming, that those around me can become just as lucky as I am. A dangling bell above the door shook as I entered. The lavish interior of the fashion shop rang with a gentle melody. Soon, though, an eloquent voice surpassed even that heavenly jingle with a chirping tone of its own. Welcome to the Carousel Boutique, where every garment is magnifique, chic, and unique. I couldn't help but smile. Now that was a fabulous greeting if I'd ever heard one. Excuse me. I spoke gently and politely as I could. Almost a week had passed since I performed the Threnody in full. Most of my nerves had been recollected, and I was happy to be in public once more. The eye-pleasing curtains and smell of clean fabric lulled my spirit as I marched into the luxurious establishment with my rough saddlebag and unassuming hoodie. I was told that a mare by the name of Rarity works here. Is there a chance that I might speak with her? Long ago, I had established for myself a simple rule when greeting ponies with whom I had become quite familiar. For the sake of simplicity, it seemed like a good habit to feign ignorance. I didn't want to alarm any soul immediately by addressing them by name. For the longest time, I second-guessed this code that I'd lived by. Oh, but darling, you're already speaking to Rarity, the one and only. She was chiding me, like a princess correcting an uncouth servant. At the time, her voice had a melodic edge to it, as if she was satirizing the very notion of such haughtiness. Oh dear, do listen to me go on, she exclaimed, stifling a giggle. My sincerest apologies, madame. I swear there's something to be said about working on a gorgeous dress when one feels all good inside. It's like grocery shopping on an empty stomach. It's only asking for trouble. Wouldn't you agree? It was a beautiful day outside, and I could already tell that much of the brilliance had seeped in through the ornate windows and walls of the place. The white unicorn in question was busy fiddling with a ballroom gown that was halfway through becoming a satin masterpiece. The tone in Rarity's voice matched the artistic whimsy of her present project. It almost felt criminal to interrupt it. Nothing to apologize for, I said with a smile as I stood behind her. I craned my neck to squint over the figure, as if instantly drawn to the curious sight of her work. There are things in this world which are unexpectedly absorbing. The Carousel Boutique had an air of enchantment. I felt like I was in the birthplace of magical things.
"I heard about your talents in craft ponyship around town,"
I exclaimed, fighting the shivers long enough to maintain normal composure.
"I was wondering if you'd be willing to earn some extra bits."
"Doing what, pray tell?" Rarity said without looking. She added another stream of blue ribbon along the edge of the gown's flaring skirt. She was one with her work. I was merely a curious satellite in orbit of her sacred project. "As much as I hate to sound dismissive of new and fantastic opportunities, I do happen to be overloaded with a most demanding list of requests at the moment. If you've indeed heard about me around town, no doubt you've become aware of my rather strict schedule of appointments of late. Pay the front desk a visit, dear, and you'll find a very thorough list of guidelines by which I perform my commissions."
"It wasn't a dress that I wanted to have made,"
I said with a nervous smile. She yanked too hard on the length of ribbon, nearly ripping it loose from its fresh seams. I could sense her hard blinks without looking. "Oh!" Her voice cracked slightly, the room dulled for the briefest of moments. "If not a dress, then what, might I ask?" I decided that it was best to be as direct as possible.
"I've heard that your special talent is jewel crafting."
My eyes danced briefly over the sapphiric cutie mark as I fiddled with my saddlebag.
"Ponies have told me that you're good at locating and enchanting gems of absolute scarcity."
"Have they now?" Her tone was flat, resembling the unfinished lengths of her dress. She stood in place, as if gazing at a blank space beyond her work. "Well, those ponies were certainly being honest, weren't they? What was it that you needed, Miss?"
"Lyra heartstrings. All I need is to have some enchanting done,"
I said, feeling a chill in the air unrelated to my curse. I added with a smile.
"And I didn't want to ask any other crafts pony around town unless I had to. I heard that you were the best, so why settle for less?"
She turned to slowly look at me, and the smile upon her face formed just as easily. "They said I was the best. Well, I do suppose that speaks for something."
"But I didn't realize how busy you were,"
I said, squirming slightly. I learned long ago that I will perpetually be a splinter in this town. No matter what I do or say, the situation is never as placid after I've arrived as it was before.
"You're working on something really beautiful. Don't let me interrupt your concentration with such a trifle request."
"Darling, perish the thought." She immediately rushed towards me as if I were an infant foal teetering at the top of a staircase. I was suddenly the most important thing in the world. I wasn't quite expecting that, and it made my heart trip over itself. Not to toot my own horn, as it were, but I can enchant stones in my sleep. If anything, it only helps me focus my mind all the more, so you'd actually be doing me a dressmaking favor. Now, she smiled regally at me. There was a sparkle in her gaze that never went away. I suddenly knew where she got her eye for beauty. "Just how many gems are we talking?" I looked into my saddlebag. The 4 soundstones that Sakura sold me days ago were completely drained of enchantment. If I had any hope of performing this new song stuck in my head, assuming that I could build the courage to do so, I wouldn't make any progress whatsoever until I had all 4 rocks completely recharged with magical potency. The sooner I had them brought back to their original glory, the sooner I would be back in the cellar performing the elegies and throwing my soul into a deep, dark abyss of mystery, cold, and shadow.
"Just 1 gem,"
I told her. I took a single dark crystal out of the saddlebag and floated it in front of the mare.
"I'm working on some new music, and it helps to have a mana battery nearby to
get you that special spark of inspiration." Rarity immediately snatched the rock like it was hers since the beginning of time. She telekinetically spun it at multiple angles in front of her eyes, examining it with an expert gaze. "Tell me no more. I know the feeling quite well. A unicorn is too often the sum of their surroundings. I almost feel bad for those not blessed to be connected with generous ley lines of our supernatural world. Have you ever heard of Hoity-Toity? Such a diamond in the rough of earth pony culture he is. Popular legend has it that he made his first successful line of outfits while working in a wooden shack outside of Las Pegasus. Ha! Can you believe that?"
My, now I see why you felt you had to come to the best gem enchantress in town, she said with a playful wink tossed my way. This poor thing has been through a lot. It's practically a doorstop. Whatever did you do with this, darling? Did you use it to summon a Wendigo from the nether? I bit my lip, struggling through a fresh wave of memories, and all of them laced with frost and shadows. Let's just say I'm not your average composer of music, I eventually murmured. My ears twitched as I tried to shake the tune in my head long enough to cast my voice evenly. Sometimes I have to reach deep down, further than what history provides, in order to restore the most sacred ballads lost to us. I believe that there are songs that mean so much to pony kind that we no longer have the capacity to remember them, and the act of finding them saps more from me than just my talents. It takes a lot of, magic energy as well. Does that make any sense to you?
I winced openly. I was already planning to just ditch the carousel and repeat the entire meeting the next day. But something that would have been lost was immediately saved by Rarity's grace, and Rarity's grace alone. What's obvious to me, darling, is an artist in search of beauty, and that is something I can instantly respect. She smiled over the dull jewel at me. I, too, have a deep admiration for classicism. If I could invent a time machine and go back to any point I wanted. She drew a hoof over her forehead and painted the roof of the boutique with rolling eyes. Oh, stars, so many fabulous designs, lost to the hungry moths and bitter decay of the ages. If I could just bring back a single illustration to the present day, I'd reintroduce Equestria to real elegance. But alas, she focused once more on the dark gem and murmured longingly, as if caressing a reflection hidden beneath the onyx surfaces. What are we here for if not to invent, inspire, and illuminate? I gulped and smiled awkwardly. I can't say I'm nearly as creative as you, Miss Rarity. I'm more of a historian. Nonsense, dear. Don't sell yourself short. She smiled my way. No pony is really just an appendix of the past. We all have the future to build together in, don't you think? I turned my gaze from her. The walls were bespeckled in random places with shiny jewels and mirrors. I saw Rarity's white coat and purple mane reflected in a glittering kaleidoscope. My colors were nowhere to be seen. I don't hold too much stock in the future, I eventually muttered and glanced back at her. Is it such a crime to live in the now? It's my experience that saints and criminals often have the same things in common, so why stress it, she remarked flippantly. Then she cleared her throat. Now, darling, about refabulousing your fabulous jewel. I shifted where I stood. I know it doesn't look like much now, but it's a ram-crafted soundstone. Trust me, dear, I know my rocks. I must say, this is a remarkable find. Where rams lack in aesthetics, they make up for in substance. If this were produced by any other culture in Equestria, it would be a lost cause re-enchanting it. How much would be appropriate for such a service? Rarity murmured aloud as she trotted towards a nearby window, parting the curtains with telekinesis so that a brilliant beam of noonday light poured directly into the heart of the boutique. It has been such a terribly long time since I provided enchanting services, come to think of it. If I recall the rates I used to charge... She paused for several seconds, to the point that I could only guess she was pretending to think for the sake of pretending. She soon tossed a tranquil glance my way. 3 bits, dear. Seems fitting, don't you think? I couldn't help it. My gaze was crooked as I blinked at her, and I fumbled a bit before answering. Yes, that is rather generous of you. I do get that a lot, it would seem. Her voice shook at the end of her utterance, like she had woken up that morning giggling and still couldn't stop. The air was alive with more than her sparkling telekinesis as she floated a metal stand over from a closet. She blew the dust off, coughed briefly, and positioned the tripod directly in front of the window. Oh, how glad I am to see this thing hasn't rusted. It would be doing my family great disservice if I ever let this heirloom go to ruin. If you don't mind my asking, I trotted over to her and the contraption. What exactly is it? She gave an airy laugh. You really must have had your horn stuck in the history books, haven't you? I quietly weep inside when I learn another unicorn hasn't experimented with more than just one style of magic. She cleared her throat and spoke while methodically floating over a glass lens and fixing it to the upper stalk of the metal device. This, my dear, is a classical magnifier.
All things that stand to be enchanted in this world have one element that can always bring back their luster, without fail.
Rarity hummed as she tilted the lens and positioned it at just the right angle to focus a thin beam of magnified light through a ring of metal clamps at the top of the stand.
Her Majesty Princess Celestia grants us more than just the warmth and beauty of the day. She gives us the very essence of her being, something sacred that was hoofed down by the cosmic matriarch herself. If we focus the energy of the sun just right, it's like grabbing magic out of the air.
She tensed her facial features as she carefully floated the dull stone over and positioned it tightly within the polished ring of the metal clasps.
And there we are. Now tell me, have ponies been given anything more generous than the princess' very own shine?
I trotted over and stared closely at the gem with subtle, foolish fascination. Indeed, before our eyes, the dullness of the soundstone gave way, and I saw a glow emanating from the center of the dark crystal in direct response to the focused beam of light. It was dim at first, but soon the familiar emerald haze was coming to life underneath the glossy surface of the jewel.
"That's indeed beautiful," I remarked. It's like capturing an alicorn's glory in a bottle."
"Not just yet, it isn't," Rarity boldly said. She brushed me aside and approached the gem like it was an altar. "This is where I come in, darling." She winked, and it was then that I realized she was about to earn my bits. With great concentration, Rarity focused magical energy into her horn. A second glow filled that part of the carousel, and soon she was encompassing the gem with a cascade of sparkles. I realized that she was using her talents to plant a containment spell on the soundstone. It was something I could never imagine doing myself. After a year of studying every book on lunar magic in Twilight's library, I'd learned to perform many fantastic feats. Yet still I was in awe of Rarity's gifts.
That's amazing."
I looked from the gem to her and smiled.
"And you make it look so easy."
"Only because it is, dear.
For me, anyways,"
she murmured aside, all the while concentrating. "I don't mean to sound like a braggart. We all have our places in this world. I've met unicorns who could do things like this in half the time, yet they charge 3 times as much. I've endeavored not to be like them. True talent is about earning more than just money, after all."
"And you've also earned my thanks, Miss Rarity."
I chuckled briefly and floated 3 golden coins out of my saddlebag.
"As well as my bits."
After she graciously took the payment with her own telekinesis, I said,
"Though nothing I could pay you would come close to how golden this day appears to be."
"Oh?"
"If I may be so bold, you seem to be in a fantastic mood. I wish all ponies had this sunny of a disposition."
"Is there any reason why they shouldn't?" She continued enchanting the stone while casting me a sideways glance. Her lips were curved, as if she was born with that smile. "Well, perhaps I'm one to talk. It so happens that I've been struck with a great deal of fortune as of late. Do forgive me if I have come across as uncouth."
"Nothing uncouth about being happy, Miss Rarity. Dare I ask the occasion?"
"Tell me." Rarity's melodic tone didn't falter for an instant. "Have you heard of Silver Seams?" My eyes swam over the rich decorations of the boutique, and I was at loss to form an answer.
"I can't say that I have, but then again, what's in a name?"
Her reaction was rather explosive. "Why, everything, Miss Hotstrings." For a second there, I thought she might accidentally knock over the stand on which the gem was being enchanted. She glanced back at me, and her eyes were as hard as diamonds. "It's what defines a pony. A title is one's vessel for notoriety and purpose." I said nothing. Thankfully, Rarity wasn't finished, and Silver Seams' fame precedes her. She's only one of the most prestigious dress designers in the Manhattan scene. She's made top-of-the-line gowns for every annual fashion exhibit in Philadelphia and Trottingham over the last decade. She produces the luxurious costumes for the regular Housewarming Eve pageant at Canterlot, and she's even designed the latest uniforms worn by the Wonderbolts.
Wow, sounds like quite the career.
More than that, Silver Seams' impact on equestrian culture is positively legendary, and I can't wait to speak with her face to face.
"I bet you can't," I said with a nod,
then jolted as the realization hit me. I glanced at the sparkling clean links of the boutique, the fancy dresses that were on exhibit, even Rarity's latest project.
"Wait, so Silver Seams is coming here?"
"Why, yes." Rarity squirmed in place. It wouldn't have surprised me if she'd suddenly sprouted Pegasus wings and performed laps around the ceiling.
It turns out she's making a trip to Trottingham and will be stopping by Ponyville along the way. Hoity-toity, with whom I have good business acquaintance, I had an opportunity to speak with her, and he personally suggested that she stop by the boutique. Silver Seams, the divine queen of fashion, stopping here! She seemed on the verge of fainting. A magical beam of light pulsed from deep within the soundstone, shaking her out of her felicitous spell. Oh, but that merely is my own little life. I just feel so bubbly, as Pinkie Pie would say. Do forgive me for failing to contain my excitement.
Sounds like you have every reason to be excited, I said with a smile.
She levitated the re-enchanted stone towards me, and I gladly took it.
You have an obvious eye for beauty. No doubt Miss Seams would love having a look at your work.
What? Rarity gasped at me, her voice hoarse and mortified. She gave the lengths of her boutique a flippant wave of the hoof. You mean these paltry attempts at day-to-day garb? I glanced at the rows of flowing, shiny dresses on display.
They seem lovely and impressive to me.
That's just it. She trotted limply past me, her voice orating towards the dull mannequins suddenly surrounding her. If I wish to impress the likes of Silver Seams, then I need to be more than lovely and impressive. I need to be absolutely stellar. I need to eke supernatural feats of whimsy from the creative nodes of my mind. I felt like I was suddenly privy to a dramatic one-mare show, and it was worth every golden bit. She'll be here in less than a week. I only have a few days to make this boutique worth its weight in polish, and I should need to make a dress that will shock her, flabbergast her, and make her leave this town with my name engraved in her mind as succinctly and righteously as her name is emblazoned into the heart of every self-respecting fashionista from here to Blue Valley.
Sounds like you've got your work cut out for you, I said.
I dropped the soundstone into my bag, zipped it shut, and smirked at her.
I have no doubt in my mind that you'll find time to make something really dazzling.
It's not a matter of time, dear. Inspiration is as spontaneous as it is divine. I've been toiling through my lists of paid projects in hopes that some idea would bloom from mundanity. It doesn't help that some of my clients make, rather plebeian requests at best. Celestia forbid that a pony would commission something with flair so that I could truly put my mind to work.
I guess I wouldn't understand, I murmured defeatedly. I almost wish there was some way I could help.
Oh, you've helped quite enough, darling. You let me ramble on when I needed to. She gave an aristocratic laugh and then turned to look me over. Although, she rubbed her chin and thought, it would only be fair if I had the chance to help you. I blinked.
I don't understand.
Perhaps I was still dazed from tackling the Threnody a few days previous. Otherwise, I had very little reason to explain my obliviousness.
You've already helped me with the enchantment.
Never mind the glowing little gem, darling. I suddenly can't help but notice your rather warm-looking choice of wear.
Ah, of course. What about it?
I gave her a sly glance.
Let me guess, it looks worn in.
Yes, to put it lightly. She smiled and leaned into me, raising a hoof just an inch above my forelimbs. If I may.
Sure.
She fidgeted with the sleeves and hood and length of the stone-gray material as she trotted tightly around me. Yes. It's getting positively threadbare at the cuffs. Oh, dear. And oh, dear, these patches. Aside from their unsightliness, the seams are starting to come loose. Darling, I know you're just trying to keep warm in this thing, but with the way it's falling apart, I can't imagine it's doing a very good job of living up to the task.
I merely shrugged. It works well enough for me. Besides, when I get cold, really cold, I have other ways of taking care of myself.
It's one thing to look after the care of senses, but what about your presentation?
Beg your pardon?
Your coat is of rare color. A fantastic one at that, Miss Heartstrings. And you keep your mane so well. You're obviously a unicorn of soul and refined grace. What a shame it would be to constantly wrap such a pretty package in veritable rags. She took a step back and tilted her horn upwards with authority. I insist. You absolutely must let me make you something that will do that job, only better.
Miss Rarity, I shook my head. Seriously, it's fine.
All dull things are commonplace and fine until we have the wherewithal to improve them. Please, I promise it will make you feel much better. Her teeth glinted with the enchanting sunlight wafting in through the window beside us. I won't even charge you. If nothing else, this will be a way for me to flex my mental seamstress muscles and give you something worth wearing proudly all at once. What better way to celebrate the arrival of Silver Seams than in the mutual company of a graceful mare such as yourself?
Please.
I took a deep breath, clutching at the ends of my stone-gray sleeves, feeling as if I was clinging to the edges of so many sacred, cold, yet altogether holy memories of solitude.
As much as I admire your generosity and willingness to do me a favor,
I shuddered briefly. I had gotten what I needed for the time being. There was only so much time I could interfere with the lives of these beautiful and blissfully ignorant residents of Ponyville, and I didn't feel right in devouring the excessive byproduct of her current joy, so I decided to tell her the truth.
But I couldn't part with this sweat jacket even if you, hoity-toity, and Silver Seams all worked together on making me something new. I have something of an attachment to it. It was a gift that a very nice pony gave to me when I needed it very most.
Very well, then. I was surprised at how easily that had won my case. I almost felt a tiny bit disappointed, actually. I can't force you to let me make you something, darling. Besides, she winked as she strolled back towards the dress she was working on. I know better than to undermine the power of a true gift. Sentimental value is like an extra pony sense. Without it, I doubt very much we'd remember what made us who we are today. I gulped and nodded towards the shadows of the place.
That's something I tell myself every sunrise.
But I'll be here, Miss Heartstrings, if you ever decide to return and accept my offer. She added more ribbons to the skirt of the dress that she was making, her voice stretching as her mind went into the mode of deep focus. I may look forward to impressing the likes of Silver Seams, but I'd hate myself if I forgot about my own clientele, if even for a single moment.
It took a mountain of effort to keep my smile alive, although I knew she couldn't see it at the time.
Of that I have no doubt, Miss Rarity. I wish you a good afternoon.
I turned around, my hooves sounding loud and invasive as they scraped against the tile floor of the boutique. Without looking back, I made straight for the door. The bell rang melodically throughout the lengths of the dress shop.
Excuse me.
I trotted into the main foyer with my saddlebag in tow.
Is Miss Rarity around?
Oh, my stars! She gasped. All four of Rarity's limbs flailed as she struggled to yank a dull black tarp over the body of a mannequin positioned atop the center stage of the boutique. She panted heavily, as if having run a 10-mile marathon at the first sound of my voice. As she clung to the shrouded dress, I saw her surrounded by a veritable war zone of scattered pincushions, measuring tape, sewing needles, and all sorts of multicolored fabrics. It had been nearly a week since I had seen Rarity last, and every single day hung like a weight from her features, pulling at the skin beneath her eyes, yanking at the frayed edges of her mane. A pair of working glasses reflected my blinking face as she gawked at me. I thought I'd locked the door.
Sorry.
I was genuinely shocked. I always fear that something like this will happen with the nature of my curse. There are times when I wonder if I'm just as incorporeal as I am invisible.
You're supposed to be closed? I'm sorry, I didn't see a sign.
Wherever is my mind lately? Rarity rolled her eyes back as her voice took on a breathy growl. I must have forgotten to lock the front entrance after returning from lunch. I've just been so terribly busy. She stood tall and proud, brushed aside a few strands of purple hair, and brandished a polite smile. I'm exceedingly sorry, Miss
Heartstrings.
Do forgive me, Miss Heartstrings, but the boutique is, as a matter of fact, closed for business at the moment. I finished the last of my client's current projects 2 days ago, and I won't be accepting any more requests until after the weekend. There's been some very pressing business as of late.
Pressing business?
I blinked, then brightened with a smile.
Oh, you mean that dress for Silver Seams that you were planning?
Rarity's face became paler, if that was even possible.
She...
Her lower left eyelid began twitching. For a moment there, I thought she was going to teeter backwards and collapse completely. How did you know about Silver Seams' visit? I winced immediately. Oops. Did one of my friends talk? She blinked. Her expression became a hard-edged word. Pinkie Pie. Somehow she's always putting her tongue to improper use.
No, nothing like that.
I fiddled desperately for an explanation. I still don't know why I do this at times. Fibbing or no, I very seriously doubt that whatever I say will be explicitly carried over from my past visitation with some pony. So, what am I covering for? I suppose I want each encounter I have with these pony villains to remain as sacred as I consider them to be.
I'm visiting from Las Pegasus, and I had attended a fashion show.
Las Pegasus? The menace in Rarity's face immediately dissipated as soon as the word fashion bled from my lips. She even smiled for the briefest of moments. Then you're familiar with the work of hoity-toity?
Yes, hoity-toity, and, supposedly he ran into Silver Steams and suggested that she stop by here.
And if you made the trip from Las Pegasus to Ponyville in such a short time, Rarity gasped breathily as a thought of great enormity rocked her mind, then there's no telling when Silver Steams herself may have arrived. She could be checking into the downtown hotel right now as we speak. She grimaced visibly and began pacing a panicked orbit around the tarp-covered dress. Oh, blessed Celestia, I'm not nearly finished. Oh, whatever shall I do?
Hey, it's okay. Just relax.
I gestured at her with two hooves and gave a gentle smile.
Silver Seams is an affluent, well-to-do pony, yes? Oh, absolutely. Then, like all rich and famous mares, she's probably taking her sweet time.
I grinned and touched the tarp with a hoof for emphasis.
I'm sure you'll have every opportunity to finish your masterpiece.
No! She blurred over and quite forcibly removed my hoof from the material that was obscuring the dress. You mustn't look. You mustn't!
I wasn't going to, Miss Rarity. Not unless you wanted to share.
Out of the question, she exclaimed, nearly snarling as she hugged the bulky item like a dying pet. No way in Equestria I could let any pony see this now.
Oh, very well then.
I gulped and ran a hoof through my mane. I cast her a nervous glance.
May I ask why?
Why? Her eyes turned into bright blue saucers. Why? Because, darling, a work of art is always as pathetic and unseemly in its most primordial stages. I would be outright cursing the dress to defeating scrutiny if I allowed another pony to see this ugly building block of the final product before it ever has a chance to shine. A self-respecting seamstress never exhibits a work until it's close to completion.
Oh, well, I guess that makes sense.
I should have just let the conversation end there, but something about seeing Rarity so nervous and disheveled put a bad taste in my mouth. Why do I always make friends with ponies I can never afford to commune with?
But I'm not Silver Seams now, am I?
Your point being... I glanced around the shadowy lengths of the Carousel Boutique. Half of the lights that were on last week were dimmed that afternoon, so that a single utilitarian spotlight was cast upon the dress Rarity was working on.
I get the feeling that you've been holed up in here for a little while, working on this thing.
But of course! Silver Seams is visiting, and I must do all that's within my power to give her something worth writing home about. After all, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
And in all that time, have you had any critical eyes other than your own to judge your work in progress?
Rarity said nothing. She merely blinked. I gazed past her expression.
Not even your friends?
She bit her lip to the bleeding point. I smiled gently.
What I'm trying to say, Miss Rarity, is that maybe it wouldn't hurt to get an opinion about it early on.
I smiled and turned my flank aside so she could see my cutie mark.
Experience with writing music has always taught me that the final composition is always a heck of a lot more spectacular if I've had some pony other than myself to be a critic throughout the creation process.
Yes. She breathed a little bit easier. It appeared as though the wrinkles in her mane were smoothing away magically as she ingested my words. Yes, that's an intelligent observation.
So then,
I turned to look at her straight on.
What's the harm in heading outside and seeing some sunlight and fetching one of your closest acquaintances to provide you a critical eye?
No, I can't have that. I blinked.
We can't?
The girls, my friends, they're a darling bunch, but so many of them are so prone to exaggeration for the sake of placating me. She paced slightly about the boutique. There are some times when I enjoy such bias, even moments when I need it. Her jaw clenched tightly as a fire burned in her blue eyes. But this is not one of those times. After a pause, she tilted her face back up with a bright expression. She glanced at me. Miss Heartstrings, was it?
Yes?
Would you be willing to tell me what you think? Her eyes were sparkling as she asked me this. I wish I could have said the same about mine.
I shifted nervously where I stood and waved my left forelimb so that she could get a good look at the patch of my worn-in hoodie sleeve.
Honestly, Miss Rarity, do I really look like I'm qualified to say what is or isn't acceptable in fashion?
You're the perfect stranger. That's qualification enough. She smiled with rising layers of hope emanating from her being, making it increasingly difficult to deny her request with each passing breath. And what's more, you're obviously a refined unicorn who is both blunt and eloquent. Please, would you do me this favor? I'm sorry to bother you with it, but I'm at my wit's end at the moment.
But I thought it was criminal to look at a dress before it's near completion.
Thankfully, dear, you've convinced me otherwise.
Yeah.
And what were you coming in here for in the first place, if I might ask?
I opened my saddlebag and produced the second dark crystal. There's this stone I need enchanting, and...
I can do enchanting in my sleep. Let's consider it an even exchange, She practically grabbed the rock from my grasp with a pair of hooves and shoved me towards the dress. Please, be a dear and look at what I've crafted so far. I'll be ever so grateful. That said, she aimed her horn and effortlessly slid the tarp off of the forbidden work of dressmaking. For a moment there, I had thought that all of the lamps that were previously dormant in the boutique had suddenly been switched on. It took me a few seconds to realize that it was actually the shiny alabaster material of the silken dress reflecting the meager light from all the windows around us, positively magnifying it. The gown's upper collar was a shimmering array of ivory beads. The sash about the middle of the dress was also studded with glistening spheres. The hem of the skirt, obviously unfinished, was nonetheless remarkable at this stage, with several layers of laced edges accentuating the weight of the fabric. I suppose, as fillies go, I've never held much stock in fashion. Like Twilight, I often had my young nose stuck in history books more often than dress catalogs. It was Moondancer who was the little princess of the foolish trio, and no doubt she would have been beside herself to see such an amazing gown propped up before her. And yet, I couldn't help but feel my breath taken away. This work of Rarity's was something befitting to royalty. I was afraid that I'd go to sleep depressed that night after staring for so long, because nothing I'd see for the rest of the afternoon could possibly match the beauty of what stood before me. A real critic would have written an essay about it. All I had to say was,
"It's beautiful."
Just that. Rarity, as it turns out, was directly beside me. I nearly jumped with fright. Simply beautiful. You barely looked at it for 10 seconds, please, I implore you. Her body hung low to the ground, as if the aristocratic fashionista was willing to beg. Take your time, get a good look at it, a real, close look, and then tell me what you think. Okay, then. Taking a deep breath, I approached the dress like a polite dancing partner. I squinted at the thing. I poured my eyes over the length of the skirt. I marched in circles around it. I stalked it like a lion hunts its prey. I made sure that my eyes had covered every silken inch until I had sufficient details to sputter forth.
It's still beautiful.
I briefly feared that Rarity would explode. I quickly followed up with,
I just realized.
I pointed at the glittering spheres along the middle of the dress.
These are pearls.
Yes, natural as air, straight from the river basins of the Blue Valley. She smiled wide. I could see the pools of her eyes quivering with each anxious heartbeat. Spared no expense. I stored them for a rainy day. As it were, aren't they splendid?
So they make up the collar, I pointed out.
And. She scampered around and stood next to me as she pointed out many layers of the skirt. There are more to be applied. Each of the final 3 seams shall be accented with them. This makes a total of 5 layers of pearls.
That's very bold.
I nodded, rubbing a hoof along my chin.
Extravagant, yes, but it shouts confidence and beauty. Natural beauty.
Yes. She calmed herself and spoke in now a duller voice. Remind you of any pony? I blinked. I looked at her, then at the dress.
Wouldn't you have put more blue gems into the design if you meant it to represent...
She squinted awkwardly, then rolled her eyes. Oh, ha! She chuckled airily. I would never think to be so narcissistic. At least not in this scenario. Think harder. I scratched my skull through my mane.
Is it for Silver Seams herself to wear? I'm not entirely familiar with the color of her coat. It matches, right?
Rarity gawked at me as if I was committing some blatant crime.
You mean you haven't seen it? You don't see what I've done?
I gazed at the dress, frantically searching for a clue. Everything was white, brilliant, pearlescent, and magnificent. What else was there to say?
Is it not the 10th of August in 2 days' time?
Rarity finally clued me in. I glanced at her. I racked my brain for the connection.
August 10th? August 10th.
Rarity paced around me, orating with authority.
Not only is it when I'm expecting Miss Seams to visit, but it's none other than the birthday of the legendary Princess Platinum of Unicornia.
Oh. I blinked. Oh. I blinked harder, the dress suddenly coming into greater focus.
One of the 3 original equestrian founders.
And, she leaned towards me with a proud grin, the first of the royal family to have united the 5 tribes of unicorns into solidarity. I stared back at her. Seconds ticked into breaths. Her resounding sigh felt like a cannonball to my chest. Oh, darling, do remember your roots. She sashayed back towards the dress and pointed at many rows of pearls. What was Princess Platinum's gift to the founding matriarchs of the 5 tribes? I thought out loud and grinned as the realization came to me.
Of course. She gave them pearls excavated from the long-lost sapphire lake of Dream Valley.
Rarity grinned at me, like a teacher congratulating a learning fool, and as she gave them those pearls, the symbol of her grace and generosity, she declared a new era for unicorns, when they would invest all of their magical energies in guiding the path of the sun and moon for generations to come. She pointed to the obvious layers on the dress where the pearls would go. 5 tribes, 5 layers. A whole ensemble of beauty, grace, and promise. She stood up straight and tall. Silver Seams is one of the most prominent members in the Manhattan elite. As all ponies know, Manhattan was formerly née Amsterdam, the central capital of old Unicornia. And she's arriving close to the birthday of Princess Platinum herself. How old would that make the monarch anyways? I glanced at her with a curious grin. 2,000 years? Her reign began about a millennium before the fall of Luna. Don't you get it?
Absolutely, Miss Rarity. I gulped. I guess my head wasn't in the right place. But Silver Seams, I winked at her. It seems like you know your audience. This is all positively dazzling.
Do you really think so? Rarity almost giggled like a fool, but once more covered it with an air of restraint. But I didn't ask for your observation to simply gush over my own labors. Tell me, do you think that the message is too obvious, now that you know the appropriate angle and everything?
Rarity, it seems that you put a lot of thought and effort into this work. Not only do I think that the message will hit Silver Seams close to home, but I think it will impress her greatly that you were capable of thinking of something so fantastic on such short notice.
Yes, funny you should say that. I've only had a week to work on it. She gulped and gazed at the dress with a rediscovered pensiveness. Still, it's not been enough. I have so little time left and so many pearls yet to apply. I fear as though I've embellished too much on the front half of the dress as it is. I don't know what I'd do with myself if I ran out halfway through the last layer.
Surely you've taken the right measurements.
Well, yes. But I won't know how much to apply until the dress has been worn, so that the fabric has been truly flexed to allow for a proper estimate. Her words trailed off as she attempted to think up a solution halfway through uttering them.
Have you tried it on yourself? I asked. The dress, that is.
Why, don't be absurd. A proper dressmaker could never do her work while wearing it. She stopped and looked at me. I looked back.
What are you...
I felt my cheeks burning suddenly.
Oh, no. Seriously? Rarity, there's no way that I could do that.
30 minutes later, I was doing that. The soundstone was resting atop the metal stand before the window, glowing slowly with enchantment while Rarity focused on another magical situation altogether. I stood atop the stage as she trotted and hovered all around me, forcing my limbs apart so as to get proper access to all the layers of the dress she had left to apply the pearls to. You have no idea what this means to me, Miss... Heartstrings, was it?
Yes.
Yes, my apologies. It's simply horrible to get a mare's name incorrect.
I wouldn't be offended.
I tried to breathe evenly.
Trust me.
Do forgive me. I'm quite beside myself at the moment. She giggled nervously before proceeding with the task, her eyes squinting earnestly from behind her spectacles. If you hadn't come out of the blue, unlocked door and all, I'd be at a loss for time. I swear you're a guardian angel."
An angel?
I gazed off towards the windows. I thought of morning dew. A warm toastiness spread through me that made the awkward situation instantly bearable. I imagined wearing this fabulous gown for another occasion altogether, and I couldn't help but smile and sigh.
Generous ponies are as generous ponies do.
Rarity smiled as she floated the needle and thread between us, fastening the pearls one at a time to the seams of the skirt.
"Some of the things you say, Miss Heartstrings, they're quite poignant. I'm tempted to ask if you've heard more about me than my gifts in sewing and enchanting."
Oh, not much more than, what they say around town.
"Yes?"
Rarity paced around me and squinted hard at her work.
"And just what do they say about me around town?"
I bit my lip. There are times when it's not so bad being backed up against a wall. I'd have expected, however, not to be wearing such a fragile and expensive dress at such moments.
Well, ponies say that you're a good seamstress and really dedicated to your work.
Oh, her voice had a dead tone to it. She threaded the needle with far less enthusiasm suddenly. "Is that all? Why am I not surprised?"
But that's not... I'm not exactly from around here.
I tried to make up for it. "Visiting from Las Pegasus, right?" Was that what I had said? Dear Celeste, I should have been better at this by now.
I'm sure that if I stayed around here longer, I would have heard more about you. But honestly, I try not to stake too much claim in gossip.
That, at least, was true. I relaxed with a gentle breath and allowed her more room to work around me.
Besides, being popular has never exactly been my shtick.
I gulped.
Especially as of late.
"Darling, why would you say such a thing?" Rarity's voice became melodic once more. My attention was instantly grabbed. "You're a pretty, elegant, intelligent young mare, if I might be so bold. I'm sure you're the object of many a stallion's desire and the envy of fillies wherever you go."
I chuckled at that. "I think your friend's tendency to placate has rubbed off a bit on you, Miss Rarity."
"Oh, please, a good compliment is like any other gift. Why shoot it down so?"
I fidgeted. "I'm sorry."
"And none of that. There's a thing to be said about excessive humility. But, just like with my good friend Fluttershy, it can be a tad grating at times."
"Do you lavish this Fluttershy with so many compliments as well?"
Rarity's lips curved. "As I do with all kindly ponies who deserve it."
"All I've done is just help you with this dress."
"Oh, but it's more than that."
"More than that, how?"
"Why, the little things, darling. Such as your asking for me by name when you first came in here."
I stared down at her. "You really appreciate that, huh?"
"Oh, don't get me started." She briefly paused in sewing to roll her gorgeous blue eyes. "If I had a shiny red apple for each time a pony marched in under that doorbell and failed to recognize me or my lifelong work, I swear I could put Sweet Apple Acres out of business with my bounty." She smiled. "That's why I'm so proud to have a perfect stranger like you come in and ask to see me, even if I was not quite welcoming when you first entered." I was gazing off towards the corner of the place. I've never liked thinking about it, but for a solid year I've always been the first pony to say my own name in a given situation. I'm not sure a year worth of journal entries is enough to explain just what this feels like. There are times when I swear, forget that I was ever once called Lyra. Those are dismal gray mornings, waking up to my own fears and regrets, the casual detritus of an indefinable curse.
"It's a wonderful thing to be recognized."
I found myself saying it out loud.
"But that's as far as I could ever hope to dream.
I like my name. I wouldn't care for it being waved around like a flag. Are you afraid of the spotlight, dear?"
"The what?"
"The spotlight." She smiled at me, while a few glittering pins floated before her. "It's my belief that we're all destined to experience it at one point or another, whether we ask for it or not. I've endeavored all my life to be prepared for it."
"You say this as if being popular is what a pony was meant to be."
"Is it not?"
Maybe I once used to believe that. Nowadays, though..."
I felt a wave of cold, but did my best not to shiver while wearing Rarity's unfinished masterpiece.
"It's my hope that when my time on this world is done, I'll leave everything behind while remaining perfectly content with myself."
Good heavens!
She almost grunted. "That's remarkably grim, don't you think?" I like to think it's a positive perspective." I gave her a reassuring smile. "I at least believe that it's possible to end things happily. How does popularity fill the niche, though?"
Well, I can't presume to lecture a pony on philosophy. Rarity sewed another pearl and paused altogether, her eyes swimming in the alabaster fabric of the half-finished dress before her. But I firmly believe that a pony's essence is not only defined by her notoriety. It is, in fact, improved by it. It's not nearly half as shallow as many are prone to think, though I don't blame them. It all has to do with what we are and what we were made to be. That had admittedly gotten my attention. I gazed earnestly at her.
"Oh, really?"
Mm-hmm. She stood before me and rested on her hind legs with a tranquil grin. Being popular is more than having fame and fortune or good standing with pony kind. She fluffed her mane elegantly with one hoof, all the while casting a glance toward the soundstone being enchanted across from us. Ponies, after all, are social creatures, finely crafted jewels of creation that are meant to shine together. When a strange pony walks into my store and has the good grace to know my name, a part of me feels reborn. It means that something that I've done, something that I've contributed to the canvas of this world, has captured their attention, and our hearts have been connected. She gazed back to me, and her face was as bright as the painting she was attempting to illustrate in my mind's eye. We are all artists deep down, every single one of us, and we make our mark on this world with the brushstrokes of our indomitable spirits. I have only ever sought to paint a masterpiece that would inspire others. Why else would we exist than to do so remarkably? As she spoke, the haunting chords of the 8th elegy were returning to my mind, but instead of drowning her out, they were highlighting every word that came to her mouth, as if she had designed the lunar instrumentals choir since the dawn of time. I remember ever so briefly what it meant to compose music before the curse drowned me. Making music was something to be shared, along with every other glorious facet of existence. I could never judge Rarity for wanting to be bigger than life itself. A generous soul deserves to rest on the highest pedestal. How else would she shower the rest of the world in gifts? Like the gift she was giving me right then. A most precious gift that would be done with far sooner than I had the desire to believe, but only the good wisdom to expect.
"I wish I could be as remarkable as you, Miss Rarity,"
I solemnly said, though my smile was joyful.
"But I think that some of us were born to shine, and others simply twinkle."
I don't know if she understood what I said, but her coy wink told me that there was something else I hadn't gathered until then. Darling, that's the biggest misconception about popularity. It's not a competition. It's more like a marathon. She trotted back over to my side and resumed work on my gown's skirt. "Miss Heartstrings, one of these days you'll break into full gallop, and I sincerely envy the ponies who will be there to witness your shining moment in the spotlight." Rarity's words filled my mind, generating an awe that was as numbing as it was felicitous to my spirit. It was distracting to the point that I couldn't focus on the 8th elegy. As a matter of fact, I lost track of time, so that I hadn't counted the days between helping her with the dress and returning to the boutique with the 3rd stone. All I could think about was making her day, hopefully in some fraction of the manner in which she had once made mine. So when I stepped through the door and heard the ringing bell announcing my entrance, I immediately chirped forth into the domain of fabric and sparkles.
"Hello, Miss Rarity? My name is Lyra Heartstrings, and I've heard a lot about you. So long as you're not busy with something at the moment, I was wondering if I could borrow your infamous talents in enchanting this gemstone that
I froze in my tracks. A tall, brown-coated mare with a gray mane stared haughtily down at me over the crest of her thick-framed, dark spectacles. She was dressed in a black blouse and matching slacks with room for her flaring tail to poke through. Nothing about her straight-laced outfit succeeded in hiding the thin and rigid frame that encompassed her being.
Huh.
I blinked. Was all she uttered at first. Her eyes narrowed on me. When she next spoke, I wasn't entirely sure whom she was addressing until I heard scampering hooves in the distance. "A regular of yours, I gather." "Oh, Rarity, a frazzled and sweating mess, dashed over between me and this angular stranger.
It's the middle of the day. I'm bound to have clientele visiting as they see fit.
I could have sworn that you were going to close for regular business as a part of my visit.
Ah, yes. Funny, I did say that, didn't I? Rarity spun to face her, all but bowing to kiss the deadpan mare's hooves. Absent mind of a genius. Our words go to places, but our hooves seldom follow. She turned to face me. May I help you? That is to say, she shook her head, blurredly, then exclaimed, I would ever so like to help you, but at the moment I'm afraid I'm predisposed. Still, if you'd leave a brief description of what it is that you require, I'm certain to leave for myself a detailed note so that I can properly serve you first tomorrow morning, as I am prompt and diligent to pay heed to all of my loyal, well-paying customers. I glanced forlornly at the mare standing behind her, above us, like a grand, looming shadow. It's not that important, I eventually murmured, backing out of the store with my saddlebag and shivers. Really, I'll come another time. Oh, but please, let me know what it is so that I can help you tomorrow. Rarity's pleading eyes briefly broke the walls of sheer panic. I am closed for business, but I would hate myself for sending away a pony in need without finding a way to get back to her. Undoubtedly, she's in need of new winter wear, the mare said, and my attention was drawn to her bored gaze being aimed at my hoodie. Or a severe alteration. She glanced lethargically at Rarity. From what Mr. Toity said, I had assumed that all of your fellow residents would wear the Canterlot line you sewed for him a year ago. Rarity gulped, and then glanced aside at me. Well, yes, I do seem to, have quite the following in Canterlot. Hereabouts, however, She gnawed briefly on her hoof and tried to cover it with a smile. Well, this is farm country, Miss Seams, and you know how earth ponies are. They sometimes rely on hoof-me-downs,
And your establishment,
Silver Seams paced across the boutique,
has been here for the better part of 5 years?
Yes. I graduated with a minor in business, and my mother's an entrepreneur, so...
That's a long enough time to make an impact on local fashion, wouldn't you think?
Yes, I suppose that...
Well, I came here to be thrilled.
The first thing that resembled a smile graced Silver's lips, but even then it was something of a stretch, like trying to carve a thin line out of black granite.
So here's your chance, Rarity dear. Thrill me.
Rarity was in an entirely different world, and I was obviously not part of it. Oh, absolutely. I have just the thing I've been dying to show you. A chill ran through the room, but I already knew the real reason why I was invisible. The young unicorn trotted eagerly over to Seam's side. After a great deal of dramatic narration over the details of Princess Platinum's legacy, Rarity yanked at a cord, and a pair of curtains unfurled, revealing the completed dress on the center stage of the boutique in all of its majesty. Rarity went over every detail, highlighting each of the 5 rows of pearls with magical blue luminance, and all the while lavishing Silver's ears with the timeless tale of Unicornia's unification before joining the equestrian herd. And as she gave a gift to her fellow unicorns, I present this gift to your eyes first. Doesn't it positively shimmer with Platinum's eternal spirit?
Yes, it's quite beautiful. I can see that you put a lot of effort into it.
Absolutely, though I must have been incredibly inspired. The entire fabrication went by in a delightful blur. I swear, it's as if the last 5 days flew by on the wings of inspiration.
If you would, I would like to be shown the floor models for your Canterlot line.
My Canterlot line?
Yes, the ones you supplied to Hoity-Toity's marvelous boutique. He's the top supplier in the upper district, or so I'm told.
Yes. Rarity gulped and sidestepped away from her detailed work as I gazed from afar. I do believe I still have some of those, year-old models lying around. Give me a moment, and I'll get them properly displayed.
You mean that you don't have a showcase on hoof already? I'd imagine that your customers would like to see your finest work on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, they are hardly my finest work. I've sold so many of them that they're practically commonplace in the streets of Canterlot by now.
Yes, and from Hoity-Toity's profitable sales, I imagine that means something. So where are they, darling? My time here in Ponyville is short, after all.
Right this way, Miss Seams. I promise you. You, won't be disappointed.
As the two trotted out of view, I stood forgotten as always in the shadows. The pearlescent dress in honor of Princess Platinum shimmered brilliantly in the spotlight, but for the first time in nearly a year, I couldn't conceive of a lonelier image than what I saw right then. I longed for the words of Rarity, but whatever could have floated across the lengths of the boutique were instantly drowned out by Silver's absorbing presence. I trotted slowly out of the shop. The bell was a dull and heartless noise. I chose to do some pony the favor of switching the sign in the front window to closed on my way out. The next morning, I entered slowly, saying nothing. The boutique was open early for business, and all of the lanterns hanging from the ceiling were lit. Two things shone in the center of the shop. One was the dress of pearls, untouched and unmoved from where I had last seen it. The other thing was Rarity's own snow-white coat reflecting sunlight like a precious diamond. Her brilliance, however, was drowned out by a dull expression as she unemotionally fiddled with a scarf that she was sewing telekinetically in front of her. The skin was weighted under her eyes, so that I was afraid to find out what, besides sleep, had tugged at her spirit. Bravely, I cleared my throat and asked,
Miss Rarity?
In a flash, the artist's eyes lit up at the sound of her name, as if a torch was ignited deep inside of her. Rarity turned to gaze at me, her expression bright but blank, like an untouched canvas.
Oh, why, hello.
It was her turn to clear her throat. She straightened her legs so that she no longer appeared stooped.
Welcome to the Carousel Boutique, where every garment is chic, unique, and magnifique.
I smiled genuinely, hoping that it would be infectious. It wasn't. I nevertheless spoke.
I'm visiting from out of town.
I paused. I started over.
My name is Lyra Heartstrings, and while I was visiting, I was wondering if I could pay you for some services, Miss Rarity.
Yes. I would be more than happy to help you, she said, though her voice hardly matched the enthusiasm that her words had meant to convey. It's always a tragic thing when a song is sucked from a pony's throat like that.
Though I must apologize in advance. I have the scarf to finish for another client of mine, and I promised them I would do it first thing when business hours began.
I glanced at the door, then back to her once again.
You're open earlier than the sign outside says. I couldn't help but notice that while I was strolling by on my morning walk.
Well, I didn't get that much sleep last night, so I didn't see the purpose in waiting another 2 hours to open.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Miss Rarity.
I gulped and back-trotted slightly.
If it helps, I can just come another day.
No, absolutely not. I forbid it, she said with a slight growl. Then, after blinking at herself, she sighed and ran a hoof over her forehead.
My apologies. I know that sounded awfully forward of me. I've heard ponies say worse, I said with a gentle smile.
I've never turned a pony away from my services, and I simply do not want you to be the first. She took a deep breath, her gaze locked onto nothing in particular beyond the nearby window frame.
Heartstrings, she smiled. That sounds like a name bound for fame.
My heart skipped a beat. At first, I think it was because a part of me actually, foolishly thought that she had remembered it. I then realized that I was simply being overwhelmed by a sinking feeling, and every time I tried to rationalize it, all that my mind's eye could come up with was Silver Seam's dark, emotionless stare. It's times like this when I do something impulsive and desperate to shake the stupor that's overcome me. Perhaps it wasn't an accident that I did such a thing in Rarity's presence.
I heard that you got a visit yesterday, I blurted. From Silver Seams, no less. That's one reason why I came here.
I tried to give a playful grin.
If Silver Seams shops at Carousel Boutique, then it must be one classy place.
My awkward compliment had no effect on Rarity. I should have known better, but I was just so desperate to get her to cheer up. I only wished she was nearly as desperate herself. The jury is still out on that, I'm afraid, she ultimately said.
Why do you say that? I imagine a seamstress like yourself would be excited to have some pony like Silver Seams pay her a personal visit.
If you could even call that a visit, she murmured aloud, struggling to fix the scarf with a sudden frustration. Oh, bother, who am I kidding? It was a delightful encounter. Truly, it was. Silver Seams is an amazing mare, and she is an utterly bedazzling conversationalist. Why, I spent 2 hours mesmerized as I heard her tell about her designing exploits in the grim streets of Stalliongrad. Simply remarkable. Rarity's nostrils flared briefly as her eyes lost themselves in the sea of fabric she was shaping into being. A pony like that has truly earned her fame. I fidgeted, standing behind her, like the shadow to something that once shone inside the place. With a cheerful voice, I boldly asked,
And did you tell her anything at all about yourself? It sounds like Silver Seams travels around a lot. I'm sure she'd like to know more about the Ponyville scene.
I'm afraid that our conversation never took such a turn, Rarity swiftly replied. She had to take leave for a meeting with one of her agents. Right now, she's likely having breakfast in bed, waiting for the afternoon train to take her to Trottingham, and onwards to another season of lavish fashion shows. I'll always admire the swift pace and courageous restlessness of the working elite, though I suspect it will forever be from afar. I didn't know how else to get her to say more, other than to utter,
I don't understand.
"What's there to understand?" she reported coldly, such that I wondered if she was even talking to me anymore. There was a cold tap, tap, tap of her floating needles coming into hard contact with one another, almost snapping loose the thread that she was knitting into place. That I set myself up for another fall. I only have myself to blame, of course, putting so much weight into a single moment, a single glance, a single blasted opportunity, as if the entirety of one's life is determined in a blink. I don't know what's more foolish. The fact that I had stooped to relying on something so desperate, or the fact that this wasn't my first time doing so. I gulped and said,
Well, the way I see it, it's not so much that we learn from the mistakes in life, but that we encounter future mistakes with greater tenacity.
Well, maybe the mistakes are the problem in and of themselves.
Rarity grunted, all but slapping the knitting materials to the floor as she flashed a very familiar dress the angriest of glances.
Maybe genius shouldn't have room for stupid errors, or else it wasn't actually genius in the first place.
The room was silent, save for the pistoning sounds of her enraged lungs. Slowly, the elegant unicorn composed herself. The voice that came out of her next was still embroiled, but collected.
Miss Heartstrings, whomever you are, I can only guess that you're a musician, and a talented one at that. Am I correct?
I swallowed and gently nodded.
Yes, at least, I'm inclined to agree with you on that. Talent is, relative, but it is real,
she said, her eyes briefly hot as she glared back at me.
Or else, why would you even subscribe to the name?
It was the name that I was born with?
Was it? She asked sharply. I blinked at her.
Well, yes, for your information.
And does it define you? Does it convey to other ponies who and what you are when they say it out loud? Does your name fill their mind with delight and joy just to think of it, because they have the utmost confidence in what you mean to them, and what beauty you provide to this world of ours?
I took a deep breath, and my gaze fell deflatedly towards my hooves.
I wouldn't say...
Well, allow me to be so bold, but when I hear your name, and I see your cutie mark, I am instantly proud of you, even though I do not know who you are, she said.
Her face was too tight to express a smile, too proud to grimace. She continued,
Because if there's one thing that I believe in, it's that we're all here for a purpose. We're placed on this earth to shine. In order to be successful, Miss Heartstrings, to be popular, or to make our mark in society, two things have to happen. We have to be sure of ourselves and the gifts that we have. Secondarily, we have to meet others who share in that vision, so that they may properly channel the contributions we have in the world of expression.
She sighed and looked towards the brilliant dress once more.
With each passing day, I feel as though there are fewer and fewer ponies in existence who know how to properly keep those channels open. Complacency has taken the place of creativity. At least I hope that's the case, as horrible as it may sound, because if I'm wrong, and it's all just me...
Rarity's breath came out as ragged. She ran a hoof over her face, muffling her next utterance.
Then, dear Celestia, how far I've fallen.
I pretended to follow her gaze, just so that I could have an excuse to make mention of the beautiful garment in the room.
I have to say, though, I can't stop staring at that gown since I walked in here. Did you get a chance to show it off to Silver Seams while she was around?
For a moment, Rarity was without words. So I continued.
It's absolutely gorgeous, but it's more than that.
I opened my mouth to continue, but a very tender part of me hesitated. The moment was too thin. After a quiet struggle, I dared to say it anyways.
Funny that you would use a pearl motif, considering it's a day after the anniversary of the legendary Princess Platinum's birth.
Rarity immediately flashed me a glance, one that had me frozen pale for a few seconds. Her face broke into something that was halfway between a chuckle and a sob. I was briefly mortified to hear her sniffle. Soon, however, she composed herself in time to smile and murmur,
You really do live up to your name, Miss Heartstrings. I only wonder where your sentiment was yesterday, when the legacy of Unicornia utterly failed me. I bit my lip.
I'm starting to wonder too.
To think, she carries the name Silver like it's a copyright, yet she dares to dress all in black.
I'm sorry?
Rarity looked at me. I'm guessing one of my friends directed you here, or one of the more high-standing members of Ponyville,
I came here to do business, I promise.
It was the truth. Most of it, at least.
I think you're more famous around town than you give yourself credit for, Miss Rarity.
Correction, darling, I'm a utility.
You're what now?
A household name, she said with a smile that obscured the layers of disappointment pouring out of her gaze. A common noun. I'm the local seamstress that a pony sends a friend to when they need a seam relined or a hem fixed or a cuff mended. Without a doubt, they say my name often, just like any pony in Equestria would say Silver Seams. But do they think twice about it? Do they have the vision, the innate desire to look ever further, an expectation that there are ponies who bury treasure deeply enough to reward only those that look for it? I'll have you know that I wasn't born with the name that you've heard the villagers call me by. It wasn't always Rarity. I blinked. I hadn't expected that at all.
You weren't?
No, darling. She shook her head slowly. As a matter of fact, I was born under the name Sapphire Sight. I come from a long family of jewel crafters and enhancers. It's only fitting that they expected me to fall in line with what is undeniably a biological tradition. Sure enough, the day that I discovered my cutie mark, it was in the act of finding a miraculous repository of natural gemstones. But while my talent might have determined my fate, I had no intention whatsoever of letting it determine my lot in life. My heart belonged to my dreams and what future they could provide me. That's why, at a very young age, even before finishing elementary school, I changed my name to Rarity.
But why Rarity?
Because I wanted a name that I could live up to. She looked sadly at the dress, and furthermore, with time and effort, to surpass. I just wanted to be special. I wanted to be famous. I wanted to be the pony that everybody would know, not just for the sound that her name entailed, but for the hidden and deeper meanings held within, like a multi-layered diamond would offer. Precious rocks aren't meant to just be mined. They exist to be put on display, to fill the world with glittering wonder, because there are things born into this world that we are granted the gift to see and admire. Long ago, I stopped being Sapphire Sight and chose to be Rarity. How else was I to aspire to greatness? What other choice did I have? Would I follow in the hoofsteps of my family and remain a mere blemish in their shadow? The most I would ever accomplish was to be a grain of salt in a steep well of tradition, or else a mere cog in some unimaginative industry.
Industry?
I remarked, an eyebrow raised. That's what everything becomes, sadly, Rarity murmured. Given enough time, and enough ritual, you go through the motions until the motions become you. And then, what is life beyond the utter necessity of the locomotion? Yesterday, I had an entire afternoon to look into the eyes of Silver Seams, to hear her voice, and to bask in her aura. But when the whole encounter was said and done, and after I had finished digesting all of her words for whatever palatable merit there was left to savor, I realized that I could have gotten as much catharsis from a machine. And do you know why? Because Silver Seams has become part of the industry, a process born from art, yet blind to it. She was, once, an aspiring daredevil of Manhattan couture. Today, she's an old and jaded mare who designs with her hooves, but they're no longer attached to her heart and soul. All that matters to her is the profit behind the process, something that is measured in money and not in magic. I would almost feel sorry for her, if it were not for one thing.
Yes? What's that?
I leaned forward, curious. Rarity gulped hard. She seemed to be dealing with her own brand of shivers by the time she eventually said that she's the one mare in Equestria who has it right. That everything today is nothing but industry, for what is commonplace is not only accepted, but worshipped on high, because every pony is afraid to think, to challenge, to find things that are new, that are special, or that are rare. She exhaled, long and hard. And all the while I've been wasting my time for ways to stand out, saving all of my pearls to make one beautiful dress when I should just be making dozens that will earn me a proper spot, even if it is just another part of some grand, bland machine. I was listening to her, but some ponies' words are rising to the surface. They were my own. I thought of my journal entries, so many identical to this that I'm writing now. If I wasn't writing for myself, what kind of exposure could I actually hope to achieve, assuming that a pony had the blessed sight to see what I had inscribed?
Would it be a deep and thoughtful critique, or an errant flip through the pages before those same hooves tossed the text back into a dusty pile of all of yesterday's tragedies? Even a song only moves a soul so far ahead before a different one sends the spirit in another direction like a gale wind. How, then, does a pony build a proper sail to navigate the storms of this saturated world?
Maybe, I spoke. Maybe you're just still waiting for proper exposure.
I glanced up at her.
It's a long wait, sure, but that doesn't mean it won't come to you, Miss Rarity. Perhaps the day will come when you rise up, like Silver Seams has. Only you won't settle for being commonplace. You won't make the same mistakes that she did.
Mistakes? Rarity smiled.
Miss Seams achieved everything that I had ever wished for myself. Do you think that she got there by making mistakes? If that's true, then I obviously need to make such transgressions myself.
She took a deep breath.
But I have never ever worked that way. Nor would I wish to.
Life is always cruel to perfectionists.
I've never blamed life for the world's cruelty, Rarity muttered. Only ignorance.
She smiled painfully my way.
And I would hate to be such a transgressor, especially before a mercifully patient and gracious mare as yourself. Please, do forgive my self-absorbed ramblings, Miss Heartstrings, and tell me how I may be of good service to you today.
My heart immediately fell down to the bottommost part of my gut. My saddlebag suddenly weighed as if it were filled with cemetery gravestones.
You know what? We had a delightful conversation. I think I got exactly what I needed from this visit.
Oh, come now. Don't let my passionate goings-on frighten you away, dear, she said softly. My best friends have occasionally labeled me as a drama queen, and they would more than occasionally be correct. Please, tell me what you came in for. You have my full and undivided attention. You very much earned it.
I gulped, shifting guiltily like a young colt who had just killed a bird with a slingshot. I fiddled telekinetically with my saddlebag and avoided her gaze as I stammered forth.
I came here, I came here because I heard that you were good with enhancing gemstones.
I should have given her the last 2 stones. Instead, something sincere inside me produced only 1.
And I desperately need to have this imbued with magic once again. I've been told that you're the best in town. I didn't want to settle for any less.
Rarity's response was a sincere breath and a nod of her head.
No pony should ever settle for less, darling.
I immediately winced.
But you're busy with this scarf, and I'm sure you've got other dresses to make, and
Miss Heartstrings.
I'll understand if you're not up to it.
Miss Heartstrings.
She grabbed the rock with a forced charge of telekinesis. Standing up straight, she gave me a placid grin as she trotted towards the necessary equipment beside the window.
Enhancing gemstones is just one of many ways that I make a living. Ever since I came to Ponyville, I've done just that, living. But that doesn't mean I can't do it gracefully and proudly. Please, let me be of service to you.
I reached a hoof towards her from afar, but it was as if she was slipping away from me. What broke my heart was that I realized she had no other place to slip away to. This was her home as much as it was mine. She was as much a prisoner, and yet she wasn't cursed. Or was she? Just what pony isn't cursed, though, come to think of it? I hadn't put that much philosophical thought into the idea until then, until I saw Rarity going through the same motions, being reborn as Sapphire Sight, setting up the lens before the window and capturing the sunlight like a piston would be powered by steam. In the end, I would give her 3 golden bits and she would give me a smile. But I no longer knew which was more jaded. Once I had left Rarity's presence, she would forget that I ever existed, but she would not forget her troubles. Her concerns were as real as oxygen, and she depended on them just as desperately. What place was it of mine to try to convince her otherwise, even if I had the power to do so? Fame means nothing to me, but that is simply the essence of my curse. How much worse is it to have an opportunity that is never realized, though the potential was always there? Was she making a mountain out of a molehill? Did society think of her as just another contributing part of the machine, assuming it thought of her at all? I wondered if there was any pony qualified to do proper, unbiased research on a soul's notoriety, and then I realized that such a proper pony was me.
Rarity? Yeah, I know her. She's the pony who operates the carousel beside the Ponyville Fairgrounds, right? Wait, you mean to tell me that's not an actual carousel? Eesh. Then what's with all the tents around that side of town then?
Ms. Rarity. Oh, I remember that. White coat, bluish mane. Listened to her perform once at a dance party in Town Hall last summer sun celebration. What's her call sign again? DJ P0N something.
She's a tailor, right? Puts together dresses and stuff? Or is that the unicorn with the streak in her hair? Whatever. One of them lives in a tree. Can I go now? I'm late for lunch downtown. I vaguely remember something about a unicorn who nearly died at the Best Young Flyers competition in Cloudsdale. Hey, did you hear what our weather flyer Rainbow Dash did on that day? She made a brilliant sonic rainbow right in front of Princess Celestia. Swoosh, kablam! And she saved 3 members of the Wonderbolts at the same time, too. Talk about your 15 minutes of fame, huh?
Isn't that the mayor who sounds like a vampire and visits Aloe and Lotus Spa twice a week?
Well, I go to Carousel Boutique all the time, but you're telling me she owns the place. I thought she was just an intern. I mean, what unicorn at such a young age doesn't inherit a business like that? You get what I'm saying?
I know there's a white unicorn who's one of the rumored elements of harmony. You know, supposedly the elements are no longer sacred objects like in olden times. They've just sort of been fused with the spirits of living ponies now. And one of them is loyalty, and she's the white unicorn. Or was it the element of beauty?
Why'd you want to know again?
Scram, lady! I'm trying to eat my sandwich here.
Come to think of it, we did have a fashion show here in Ponyville once. It was almost a year ago. Some fancy schmancy art critic from Canterlot came for the whole event. Wouldn't you know it? It was all just some practical joke on the poor schmuck. It had to have been. The dresses on display were gaudy as all get out. I swear I've never seen a posh know-it-all so enraged. Wait, why does this come to mind? Because the whole dank prank was Rarity's idea, wasn't it? I mean, that's why you're asking around about her, right?
Ew, like, why would I go shopping at some overpriced hole-in-the-wall place on the far east side of town? I totally, do all my shopping at Rich's Threads. After all, that's where all the popular fillies go. Leave the Carousel Boutique to the upstart snobs who run the place.
How dare you! I glanced over from where I stood inside Sugar Cube Corner, interviewing a pair of young mares with pastel, permed manes. The two gazed in the same direction, looking bored beyond all measure. The author of the last exclamation immediately wilted upon our combined glance.
Not that I have anything against you as ponies, but...
Fluttershy took a deep breath and summoned the same frown that had empowered her voice just seconds ago.
But Rarity is not an upstart snob. She's a talented pony with a gift for making beautiful dresses. And she most definitely does not overcharge her customers. What's more, she's my friend, and she deserves more respect than that.
Cha!
One of the fillies rolled her eyes.
So, if that was true, then how come I never knew her name until now? Yeah,
the other joined in, glaring Fluttershy's way.
If she's so great, then she should be hanging out in Trottingham and not Hickville Central. It only figures that you're defending her because you're, her friend. Huh, let me guess. She totally gives you discounts to say nice things about her.
That's not true. Rarity...
She gulped.
She just...
That's what I thought.
The two fillies marched off, their bright tails swishing in unison.
Come on, let's ditch these lamos. The smoothies here totally stink anyways. Oh my goodness, I was just about to say the same thing. No way! We should so take notes about it.
The two left, along with their perfume. I glanced crookedly at their absence, cleared my throat, and pivoted slowly to face Fluttershy.
So, you say that Rarity is a talented pony and deserves respect?
Mm-hmm. Fluttershy was still obviously reeling from the duo's heartless words. She hid behind a satiny lock of pink hair and turned to walk towards the far end of the semi-crowded eatery.
Never mind. Forget I said anything. It was rude of me to have interrupted. But what if I wanted to hear more of what you had to say?
She merely walked away, slowly, like a raindrop sliding downhill. I shrugged, adjusting the sleeves of my hoodie.
Okay, well then, I guess I've learned all I needed to know about that upstart snob at the Carousel Boutique.
And soon she was aiming an angelic frown at me once more.
You take that back right now!
A blink, a fluttering of her lashes, then a deep blush.
If you don't mind, that is.
I smiled her way.
So now you want to defend her again?
She shuddered and brushed away a few bright bangs from her blue eyes.
I never thought I would have to. Rarity has always had such a good reputation. At least, I've always thought so.
She glanced up at me, and the smile that came from her was as soft and gentle as her voice. and twice as sincere.
Just like any pony, you have to get to know her to understand her. She's the most generous, elegant, thoughtful, and giving mare that I know. The question that's on my mind...
I leaned against a counter of glass-encased desserts as I gazed at Fluttershy.
Is whether or not Rarity is satisfied with that. Satisfied with what?
With some pony having to get to know her before they can understand her. Rarity's an artist, right?
Oh, most definitely. She's designed hundreds of dresses for all kinds of ponies, from local celebrities to visiting diplomats to close acquaintances.
So then...
I glanced towards the exit through which our two companions had just exited.
How is it that most ponies know so little about her?
Fluttershy chewed on her bottom lip and looked away shamefully. I gave her a curious glance.
Have I struck a bad chord? I'm a musician. Be honest with me, because I really hate doing that.
Why do you want to know so much about her?
Fluttershy gulped.
About my dear friend Rarity.
I scratched my neck and weathered a wave of chills.
What's your name?
I asked just to hear her say it herself.
Fluttershy.
Do you know your mother's name?
Yes. Why is that important?
Humor me, if you will.
My mother's name was Windflicker. She was born in Stratopolis.
And your grandmother's name? What about hers?
Fluttersky. I was more or less named after her.
Her mother had a name too, yes? Your great-grandmother.
Fluttershy had to think about that for a second.
Silvercloud, I think. Oh dear, I feel terribly for not remembering right away.
And, I leaned forward slightly, what about your great-great-grandmother? Do you know her name?
Fluttershy drew a blank. Her cheeks were rosy as she fidgeted before the unexpected inquisition.
If you must know, I don't remember my great-great-grandmother's name either, I murmured, then gulped. Nor do I recall my great-grandmother's. So you're 1 point ahead of me already, Miss Fluttershy, if it's of any consolation.
What are you saying with all this?
Rarity is here. Unlike your ancestors and mine, she's alive. She lives among us, barely a few walls away from where other ponies dwell. Why is it that so few of them know her name, even when she does so much to establish a reputation for herself?
I adjusted the collar of my hoodie and murmured towards the walls.
And just how many generations will it take to forget she ever had a name to begin with?
To be honest, I never thought about it.
I nodded slowly.
Neither have I, not until lately. I've long taken such things for granted. Now I can't afford to do anything but obsess over it. Only, I believe, Miss Rarity has made it the focus of her entire life.
And what has it earned her?
You obviously care about her to have thought about it this much,
Fluttershy said woefully.
I only wish I was so considerate.
I gave her a curious glance.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're her friend, right? What makes you think that you were being inconsiderate?
Because...
Fluttershy struggled to push the words out.
Because when I should have been there for her in the past, I failed. And I wasn't the only one. All of the ponies she depended on failed her as well.
I don't see how that could be.
But it's true. For this year's Grand Galloping Gala, Rarity and myself and 5 others were all invited to attend the royal ceremony. In honor of the occasion, Rarity took it upon herself to make all the dresses, free of charge. I've never seen a pony do something so generous before, but after she had put so much time and effort into the gowns, we didn't show any gratitude.
No?
No.
She guiltily shook her head.
Not at first, at least. We all had our own ideas of what our gowns should have looked like. Any self-respecting seamstress would have quit on us all right there and then, but not Rarity. Her desire to make us happy was bigger than her desire to express herself, which she had every right to do. She sewed the dresses we wanted to have made, but they were just terrible, and we were too blind and selfish to realize it. And then...
She winced, as if a wave of nausea was passing through her frail body.
There was this fashion show, and these terrible dresses were put on display for the likes of Canterlot's own hoity-toity. It was Rarity's one chance for the spotlight, a moment she had always dreamed of, and we ruined it for her.
That? I bit my lip helplessly and nodded. That sounds horrible.
It was horrible. She was devastated, but we all tried to make it up for her. We finished the dress she was making for herself for the gala. Then, after grabbing Hoity-Toity's attention, we were able to perform a second fashion show, a private one, and he got to see all of Rarity's marvelous designs for the first time. He was impressed, and he ended up paying her a great deal to have her new line sold at his shop in Canterlot.
Well, there you go, friends to the end. Sounds like you paid her back good and proper.
Paid her back?
She gave me a sad, wilted expression.
Oh, if only that were true. Oh, don't you see? The damage was done. Even if Hoity-Toity was impressed, did that really mean anything for Rarity's fashion career?
She gulped hard and shut her eyes shamefully.
Yes, she earned a lot of bits from the private show. But what had happened in town ruined any chance she had of coming public in this part of Equestria. She sold hundreds of dresses from her line throughout Canterlot, but right here, in her home, where her reputation matters most, she's had her chance in the spotlight, and it's gone. Gone forever.
I stared around the lengths of Sugar Cube Corner, entrenched in thought. Finally, I couldn't help but ask,
Then why does she stay if her opportunity here is come and gone already?
I wish I knew. I'm only glad she's around because she's my friend, and it fills me with joy to be in her presence.
Fluttershy smiled painfully.
Especially since it wouldn't be the last time that is, I put a dent in her dreams.
How so?
Well, something like that happened again.
Fluttershy once more avoided my gaze.
A famous photographer named Photo Finish came to town. Rarity had an opportunity to show off her fashion, and she needed a model. She chose me. I was so honored, but then something unexpected happened. Photo Finish focused entirely on me. She paid no attention to Rarity's beautiful outfits whatsoever. It was because of Rarity that any attention was paid to me in the first place. I wasn't a big fan of it, and it didn't last for all that long, but I was somewhat famous in modeling for a while.
And in all that time, Rarity didn't receive an ounce of fame.
Fluttershy's voice was shaking somewhat as she spoke.
All that sweet mare wants to do in life is make her own name known. She wants to make beautiful things and have other ponies share in it. And at least twice already, fame has passed her over. You could even say 3 times, if you count her connections with Princess Celestia's star pupil.
Twilight Sparkle?
That's a name that's bound to go down in history, Fluttershy remarked. And I know Twilight. Just like myself, fame isn't important to her. And to Rarity, our mutual friend, it means everything. And she's given everything, over and over again, with a generous heart that amazes me each and every day.
I took a deep breath and laid a gentle hoof on Fluttershy's shoulder.
I envy you, in a lot of ways.
Me? Why?
I smiled.
Because you're close friends with a living fountain of blessings such as Rarity.
I know. But then there's one thing that I can't understand.
She entreated me with soft eyes, as if begging me to answer what would be an impossible question.
Why is it that a fountain of blessings like her could seem so terribly cursed?
I didn't know either. But I was almost willing to ask Rarity herself.
Hello?
I spoke under the resonating tone of the Carousel Boutique's entrance bell the next day.
Hello? My name's Lyra Heartstrings, and I was wondering...
I froze in place, blinking, as several flailing bits of fabric flew past me like silken comets.
Is something wrong?
Oh, whatever could be wrong? Rarity grumbled. She was a purple-capped volcano waiting to burst, or else she had already burst several hours ago. Her voice was as hot as her bloodshot eyes as she fiercely rummaged through the messy sea of sewing materials that the center of the boutique had become. Could it be wrong that I didn't have the lace that I needed to finish a dress order that I should have tackled a week ago? Could it be wrong that I've put my trivial problems ahead of everything else in life? Could it be that I swore I bought some yellow lace 3 days ago, and now it seems to have grown hooves and galloped away? I gulped nervously and stood as still as an iceberg as she darted all around me.
Would you like some help with...
With what? I put myself into this situation. I should be the one to pull myself out of it. As if I haven't allowed myself enough distractions already. She paused briefly, knee-deep in a hill of fabric, to sigh and groan my way. Ma'am, I'm exceedingly sorry for this immature show I seem to be putting on, but I'm afraid you've caught me at a very bad time. I'm behind with several projects, and though I'm willing to take orders, I doubt very much that I can make my services available to you any time soon.
And I completely understand,
I said, showing a smile past my chills in an attempt to solace her.
I just heard about your work around town, Rarity, and I wanted to see... Oh, I'm surprised the local gossip had a breath to spare about me. She smiled bitterly as she dug through another messy mountain of unkept materials. They do all seem to be so eagerly enthralled in covering every inch that the genius hooves of Silver Seams have covered.
Silver Seams?
I leaned precariously on the edge of multiple responses before deciding to play blissful ignorance.
You mean to say that she was here, in Ponyville?
I had forgotten how much Rarity hated ignorance. Ha! But of course, she no longer is. But that's not enough to silence the sound of her name in the air. At least not enough to hide the fact that she didn't leave for a trip to Trottingham empty-hoofed.
I
blinked awkwardly. It was obvious that Rarity's ire was steering this whole conversation. I was merely the rudder.
She didn't...
Why, haven't you heard? Rarity spun to face me, slapping her hooves on the tile floor as deadly parentheses next to her exclamation.
She bought an entire wardrobe of fall clothing from Rich's Threads before boarding the train heading east. She even paid the store owner a generous commission.
Her eyes lit up like twin meteors of murderous blue.
Here's something no pony has likely heard.
She paid the Carousel Boutique a visit too. But what did she have to give to me? Only a purse full of yawns and 2 hours of autobiographical anecdotes that I couldn't possibly write a book about. She barely even glanced at my work, even the dresses that she had pretended to be interested in, and now she's leaving Trottingham with half of the inventory from Rich's Threads. I swear, all that was holy and decent in this world went into the grave with Starswirl the Bearded.
I
shifted nervously.
That sounds rather odd.
I cleared my throat and braved a glance at her.
I've never been to Rich's Threads. Is the fashion establishment anything to shake a stick at?
Fashion establishment? Rarity all but spat her tongue out. She marched halfway across the room towards me and pointed a vicious hoof.
Darling, let me tell you something about the stallion who owns that place. Filthy Rich and his entire family became rich by selling apples, which they didn't even grow. He's an accountant attached to a gallon of hair gel, and albeit a good one, nothing more. He knows about as much concerning fashion as a minotaur would recognize a can of potpourri. He'd sooner dedicate a department of his store to dresses as he would to apples or bear traps or Celestia knows what else.
Rarity seethed and strangled an invisible neck in front of her grinding teeth.
And Silver Seams!
She clenched her eyes tightly shut and exhaled hard. No doubt she dredged him of all of his feminine attire just so that she could haul the gargantuan bounty all the way up to Trottingham, disassemble the gowns to their base materials, and have the means to lazily slap together some uninspired, gaudy, but altogether successful line of autumnal pish-posh. Because, after all, that's what the art of the dress is anymore. A heterogeneous assortment of scraps that we have the divine authority to pilfer and reintroduce into the world as new, though it's painted with all the vomitous colors of yesterday's garbage. At the end of such a tirade, she did indeed look close to retching, so she sat herself on the edge of the stage beneath a familiar white dress in order to collect her breaths. It maddens me so! She fanned herself with a dainty hoof as she mumbled. All it is anymore is just process, a factory proceeding of mundane proportions. We have it within ourselves to do better, to be better. What is the point in expression when what popular is expressionless? She gulped and gazed down at the floor, her mane bordering either side of her face in frazzled purple tributaries. I always wanted to make a difference. With this shop, with my trade. I wanted to share my inspiration with all of Equestria. Then some pony like Silver Seams comes along, and yet again I encounter a soul who has risen as far as I'd like to rise. What does that make what I desire to be? She closed her eyes and ran 2 hooves over her face. I swear. I wonder if there's any point in trying. All of this taste, I'm sick to death of this taste. I stood in the silence that followed, afraid to break it, as if the shattering was something neither of us would be able to withstand. I realized that it was my place to say something, where it was no pony else's. My voice was something that would only be forgotten. I've come to expect my echoes, however, to be something immaculate.
Perhaps what matters, Miss Rarity, is that you have a taste of your own? I said, as I marched over and gently brushed a length of the pearlescent dress's skirt.
I smiled softly and spoke.
In a bland world, some pony is bound to be attracted to your sweetness.
A noble dream, she murmured, and lowered her hooves. She gave a frown to the same dress I was smiling at.
But how long must I dream it? Afraid to wake up.
She gazed up at me. Would I find myself turning into an old mare by the time my ambitions finally paid me back? I shudder to imagine my own genius then.
My soul, with all of its genius, sapped, already.
just so that I could walk in the shadow of those like silver seams and hoity-toity, because I, too, will have become too sensitive to brilliance. I wouldn't know about that. Neither can I pretend to. She stood up and gazed dismissively down at the dress like a gray-maned creature I had once seen. I tell myself that I can think of the future, but dreaming of it is not the same thing. I only have so many years of my youth left. It's time that I decided to make the best of them. For too long I have chased the flighty dreams of an enchanted filly. The likes of hoity-toity and filthy rich have found their successful places in this industry. She gulped in resolution. It's high time that I found mine.
But Rarity, this dress is beautiful.
And indeed, it will find its place in some pony's memories forever. Rarity's nostrils flared. For the right price. After all, that's the way of things. She turned towards me, a deadpan ghost of some pony who had once giggled like a songbird. Might I perchance assist you in a purchase today? I assure you, my dear, that although I may be a tempestuous personality, I am nothing but a perfectionist in my services. I gazed at her, at the dress, then to my saddlebag. I choked on something briefly, and then murmured towards the walls.
Actually, I wasn't wanting to buy or order anything.
Oh?
As a matter of fact.
I gazed at the dress. Something within me bubbled. Something that had, on occasion, deeply desired to mimic the crackling blazes of the fireplace back at the cabin. I needed to know that there were things in this world capable of rising from the ashes. The only thing real about defeat are the letters comprised in making up the word.
I was sent to deliver a message?
A message?
Yes.
I gulped, trembling with the realization of what I was suddenly planning to do.
From some Pegasus that I met in Sugar Cube Corner. A very sweet mare with butterflies for a cutie mark.
Fluttershy. Part of Rarity's face was inescapably brightened. Her eyes blinked. What could be so important that she's incapable of informing me face to face?
She says that she needs a sweater made for her pet hedgehog back at her house. The poor thing is sick.
Pet hedgehog. Rarity scrunched her face. She rubbed at her chin in deep thought. How odd. I wasn't aware she was in possession of a hedgehog.
She said she just found it this morning. The thing must have fallen into the river overnight, and she thinks it's suffering from pneumonia. If she doesn't have a sweater or blanket made for it soon, say no more.
Rarity waved a hoof, sighed, and then gave me a tired smile. The poor darling must be sick with worry. In fact, I'm more worried about her than the little animal, truth be told. Everything else can wait as far as I'm concerned. But thank you for delivering the message, Miss
Heartstrings. And, it's my pleasure.
I gulped and smiled nervously at her.
I don't suppose you have the makings for knitting a sweater in all this mess.
Ah. Rarity tossed her head and marched towards the far end of the room. Don't remind me. I'm struggling with a dress order involving a great deal of satin and lace. If I'd just calmed down and opened my eyes, I'm sure I'd find what I'm missing. No doubt your selflessness in listening to me helped that some. She marched completely out of view, her voice trailing from a deep closet adjacent to the main foyer. Now please, Celestia, tell me I'm not missing my knitting materials either. Bah! This whole silver seams business has me flank over elbows, I swear. As she rambled on, I bit my lip and inched towards the dress of pearls. Only when I was satisfied that she wasn't immediately trotting back, I opened the lid to my saddlebag. That afternoon, I expected Rarity's expression to be full of anger the first moment I saw it. Indeed, it was full of shock, immense, numbing shock. That's how I knew that I had achieved what I wanted. It was hard to see her face at first, not so much that she was so far away, but because of all the other sensory details I was too busy juggling at that very moment. As she trotted across the center of downtown Ponyville towards where I stood, I drew my attention away from her pale gaze, away from the bright crimson sunset casting a spotlight on me, away from the chorus of crickets accompanying my strings into the edge of the night, and finally away from the dozens upon dozens of awestruck pony faces forming a solid ring around me. I telekinetically plucked each of my lyre strings with precision, grabbing the delightful melodies of the past and repainting the living present with them, in an attempt to form something that was twice as inspiring as it was graceful. Beneath the chords, I heard my audience, and I reveled in their sound, for they were Rarity's audience too. Have you ever heard something so beautiful? She's playing Platinum's Ode to Union, I do believe. but I've never heard it like this before.
When was the last time you heard anything like this in Ponyville? Shh, please, I want to listen.
I can hardly listen. I'm too amazed by that dress she's wearing. Where would she find such a thing?
Are those real pearls? They're remarkable. Oh, how fitting. It was Princess Platinum's royal birthday a few days ago.
I thought you could only witness the likes of this in Canterlot.
That's brilliant, I tell you.
And that dress, did she have it tailored?
Don't be absurd. That gown must belong to royalty. Who is that mare?
I've no idea. She just trotted into town and started playing.
I must ask her where she got such a marvelous dress. I swear, it's made my whole evening.
From the corner of my vision, I could see Rarity's purple mane bouncing as she tossed her gaze from left to right, her jaw dropping further and further towards the ground with each subsequent murmur of awe from the crowd. As she tried to scrounge an explanation from her stupor, a soft yellow shape trotted up and stood beside her.
Oh my goodness, Rarity, isn't that... Yes, Fluttershy. It's the dress that went missing a few hours ago. I was on my way to the police station to report a theft, but now... My stars. Do you think that unicorn must have stolen... Shh, quiet, Fluttershy, dear. Will you listen to that? Huh? Oh, it's very nice music. Platinum's Ode to Union, I think. No, to the ponies. Do you hear them?
Both friends leaned into the crowd, their ears pricking to the symphony of murmurs that continued to form a backdrop to my own cascade of strummed notes.
I swear it's as though that dress was crafted out of sea foam from the Blue Valley's shores.
Could it be a sea pony import?
Are you daft? That's a myth.
That gown is too gorgeous to be real. It fits the performance well. It's like hearts-warming come early.
Hee hee! Tell me, does this unicorn take bits?
Or her dressmaker, for that matter.
I inhaled every word I could hear. I stood with my eyes shut, smiling meditatively, as I finished the last few notes of the song. Only when I was finished did I open my eyes, and as I did, my gaze was locked on Rarity's. I gave her my full attention. All the while, the crowd's applause broke the crisp advent of night. I let my teeth show through my curved lips, before giving a graceful curtsy, and then resting the lyre down beside my saddlebag.
Bravo! Bravo!
Magnificent performance, young lady.
It's been a long, long time since I've heard the Ode to Union in its entirety, and that was by far the best solo I've ever heard.
Tell us, please, are you from Canterlot? Are you representing one of the noble houses? Before you answer that, tell us, where did you get that marvelous dress?
The crowd laughed from sheer joy electrifying the air. I let my giggles join the chorus, then bowed my head.
I may be dressed royally, but that's only because royal attention was given to the making of this outfit.
I stared across the crowd and pointed with a hoof.
There the very seamstress is, none other than Carousel Boutique's own Rarity. It was she who made the gown, after all. Was there any doubt?
The entire crowd spun in two halves to gawk at her, as if they had melted down the center from the sheer path of my gesture. Rarity stumbled back, stunned by the forest of bright eyes suddenly assaulting her. Fluttershy blushed beet red and immediately marched away as a fresh throng of ecstatic ponies surrounded her fashionista friend.
Rarity, I should have known!
A pony with your taste wouldn't have settled for less.
Good to know you're putting your heart and soul into your crafting still. Yes, Ponyville could use more of that. All of Equestria, for that matter. Oh, please, tell me you have some more pearls left at your shop.
We absolutely have to have marching dresses like that for the Trottingham Garden Party.
Oh, and Nightmare Night. I've always wanted to dress up as Princess Platinum. Surely you have it within you to make something beautiful like that again.
And how appropriate to showcase your work with the performance of Ode to Union. Makes me feel like we've gone back in time.
Yes, such beautiful music to go along with such a beautiful dress.
Please, tell us, are you accepting commissions? Do you and this musician work together, Miss Rarity?
She bit her lip and slowly spun to meet all of the entranced faces. Her body was trembling noticeably, but there was an undeniable sparkle in her eyes.
That is to say,
She glanced over the many heads and manes until her vision locked with mine.
I'm just as surprised at this as all of you are. She gulped. It's funny how spontaneous inspiration can be, yes?
The group chuckled. Fluttershy smiled with pride. And I was alive.
Seriously, I had no idea that he had stolen the gown.
It was an hour later, and we were both trotting into her boutique, alone. The world outside the windows had grown dim and purple. I knew I had very little time left to wrap things up, but I was convinced that I had done all that I needed to do.
Do forgive my naivete, Miss Rarity.
I disrobed from the dress slowly, careful not to add so much as a wrinkle to its unblemished lengths.
I get carried away sometimes while I'm on vacation like I am now. When a pony offers me a dress this gorgeous for such a generous price, I'm usually wise enough to think twice on the matter. Unfortunately, I'm a long ways from Canterlot, and I think I left my good sense back there.
Oh, I understand the feeling quite well, miss. Heartstrings, was it?
Mm-hmm.
On my first trip to Appaloosa, I nearly engorged myself on the general store supply of cactus nectar coffee. It's something that my friends and I seldom wish to recollect.
Yeah,
I gracefully finished disentangling myself from the garment and hoofed it to her.
I can only imagine.
She gently took the dress, levitating it upwards in translucent telekinesis. Her face was calm and unemotional, and she hummed and asked,
"Could you describe this stallion again, the ruffian whom you claim peddled this to you in the streets behind the town hall?"
I pretended to think hard, my eyes scanning the ceiling of the shop.
He was short, stubby, a Pegasus, I think. One of his wings was molting. Yellow coat, I believe. A sickly color.
"It can be, on occasion."
Rarity flippantly droned. She hung the dress neatly over the body of a mannequin. She spoke without facing me.
"And just how many bits did he take from you?"
Oh, you won't believe this, but 300. Isn't that insane?
I rolled my eyes and gestured dramatically.
Dear Luna, if my parents only knew, they'd kill me. I'm just sorry that it all turned out to be the result of a pathetic robbery. The stallion said that he bought this gown from Lady Rarity's boutique in the east side of town. Nowhere did he ever bother telling the truth, that he outright stole the thing.
"Well, he must be a rather fastidious robber," Rarity said. "We both owe him for keeping the dress in such good shape, at least."
She finally glanced my way. "No doubt you'll wish to pursue a means of retrieving your bits back."
Well,
I waved a hoof and made a face.
My parents have blown their noses in easily twice as much as 300 bits before. How else do you think that I got through Canterlot Music School?
And quite a remarkable talent you have there, Miss Heartstrings.
It's a hobby.
I then grinned widely at her.
But hey, it worked out for both of us, no?
I'm afraid you're going to have to be more obvious, dear.
Why, the crowd that gathered.
I gestured out the door with a drunken grin.
To be honest, I was just wanting to show off the dress I got.
Were you now?
But I had no idea that I'd get 36 ponies willing to listen to my performance. I'm telling you what, Miss Rarity, your dress is something else. I've never gotten that much attention before.
Truly?
Yeah, it was like cheating in a way. Seriously, I owe it all to you and this dress you made.
She chuckled breathily, trotted around to face me, and planted a pair of hooves on my shoulders.
"Miss Heartstrings, sit with me, if you would."
I blinked at her, my mouth frozen in the middle of trying to reply. I felt my heart beating oddly, as if I was missing a chord for the first time that evening. I did as I was told. I felt like I was having a time out with my mother. As Rarity spoke, I soon found out that I wasn't that far off.
"My dear, no robber with any form of self-respect would steal a work of art like that and sell it for anything less than 2,000 bits.
I gulped
and resumed smiling as plastically as I had before.
Well, maybe he was, desperate. Yeah, that's why we have criminals in the first place, right? Some ponies are just in such a need for money straight away that they'll sell just about anything.
It would have been far easier for such a thug to have broken through the window of a grocery store overnight and grabbed himself a bite to eat."
She glanced out the window.
"As a matter of fact, Ponyville is farm country. My friend Applejack tells me that her orchards are pilfered from all the time."
But maybe...
I gnawed on my lip. I was losing grip of this situation at a frightening plummet. My brain just wasn't yet willing to accept it.
Maybe he wasn't all that bright.
It would have to be some mental affliction for some pony to ignore the value of so many natural pearls lying in his possession. If such a pony were expert enough to grab the dress from my store, he, or she, could have made a year's worth of profit by placing the outfit on Manhattan black market.
I tried to say something else, but my mouth was dry. It was hours after I had done the unthinkable, and only then was I starting to feel the initial waves of horrid guilt. Thankfully, Rarity's gentle voice lulled my throbbing pulse into a tranquil stream.
"You strike me as quite a resourceful, intelligent unicorn, Miss Heartstrings. This afternoon I came into this very room to search for something. What it was I was looking for I can no longer recall. All I know is that this latest dress was missing, and I had no proper explanation for where it could have gone, or who would have taken it, until now."
I gazed down at the floor between us. I kneaded my hooves against the tile as I felt the first wave of chills hit me that night.
Miss Rarity, I won't judge you for any action you're about to take, but stop a moment.
Stop for a moment and think about what happened out in the center of town. Without even looking, I could tell she was making a strange face. What about the center of town? I looked back into her gaze. I couldn't tell if her eyes were glossy or just my reflection.
The ponies you lived with, Rarity. They loved this dress. They loved the quality of it, the meaning behind it, and the expert craft and work that went into it.
Correction, darling. She smiled painfully. They adored your performance. It just happened to be painted in the colors that I once made.
But it's one and the same.
No. She shook her head, gently exhaling. No, it isn't.
You just need a way of getting attention,
I exclaimed, my breath becoming ragged as I, too, was becoming witness to my own desperation.
Your dress is fantastic, Rarity. All it needed was its time in the spotlight, and...
Shush. She gently caressed my shoulder with her hooves, staring positively into my soul as her words came out. I don't know who you are, Miss Heartstrings. I don't know how you've heard of me, or what you presume to know about my artistry. All I know is that you're the perfect stranger. However, in spite of this, I do believe that there is one thing that we both have in common, and that's knowledge of the fact that there is nothing left in that dress that I believe in anymore, save for a lesson on how to drive my talents down brighter, wider roads.
But...
I tried my best not to whimper. I felt like a little fool as I sat before her. I avoided her gaze, absorbing myself in the sight of the dress, as if trying to scoop up the pearls with my tears.
But you deserve to be remembered, Miss Rarity. You're such a talented, hard-working unicorn. You deserve attention, and
it's not a matter of what we deserve, darling. She leaned towards me, stealing my gaze. It's a matter of what we earn. Has any pony ever told you that I'm a living piece of the elements of harmony? She leaned back and spoke sagely. Destiny, for whatever reason, has designated me as the element of generosity. I was instrumental in the exorcism of Nightmare Moon's taint from Princess Luna. Ever since then, I've been privileged and blessed to be tied to the hip of Twilight Sparkle, the only unicorn in 5 long centuries who's been made the personal protégé of Princess Celestia herself. Don't you think that if I wanted to take advantage of my connections and seal myself a high seat in the Canterlot fashion scene, I would have done so easily by now? I reflected quietly on that, a sore lump forming in my throat. She smiled at a warm thought. I would be lying if I said I wasn't tempted in the past to do something so pathetic and shallow. But I'd like to think that I've become a better mare since then. She gazed sideways at me. It was gentle, but piercing. There are many things in this world that I'd like, and fame is one of them. Even my closest friends will tell you. What they don't know, but should be obvious to any pony, is that a soul such as my own greatly desires to better herself as a lady and an artist, more than any other dream of mine that I would pretend to call supreme. You see, Miss Heartstrings, if I don't earn my place in this world, then the most I'll ever become is a queen of hollow victories. No such matriarch of mundanity would ever deserve a tiara, no matter how sparkling. I took a shuddering breath and gazed out the windows at the darkening approach of night.
I have that desire too, Rarity. But I learned long ago that I can't pursue it so easily anymore.
I sniffled and put on a brave face, albeit a deadpan one.
I just wish I could help those around me shine where I can't.
We are all born with the ability to shine, Miss Heartstrings, but we can't force the spotlight on one another. Otherwise, we'd just be dancing to an old, boring tune, conceived only once, but never allowed to blossom on its own. And if there's anything I can't stand, it's a performance that doesn't earn itself an encore. I gave the dress one last, forlorn glance. It was a chuckle that escaped my lips instead of a sob, as I painfully let forth, I suppose some things in life can't stand to be re-enchanted. That's why I live to invent newer and prettier things. Rarity smiled, and so should you. I watched as she stood above me and paced across the way. I hate refusing gifts, especially ones so sincerely and passionately donated. She telekinetically picked up a black tarp and carried it over to where the gown of pearls was residing. What you tried to do today, was daring, brash, and altogether generous, which is why I'm not about to press charges for theft that lasted the entirety of what would otherwise have been a boring afternoon. She hung the canvas material over the dress. The room grew dimmer so that her bright features suddenly stood out like polished ivory. I very much envy your talents, dear. A dress is dazzling for an evening or two, but music, gorgeous music lasts forever.
Oh, how I wish I could start over sometimes and engage myself in an art that was far more immortal. I swallowed hard and tilted my head away so she wouldn't see the tear rolling down one cheek. In my mind, I saw the smiling faces of listening ponies all around me, and they once again mimicked the dying ashes of a cabin fireplace.
Don't envy too much, Miss Rarity, or you'll find yourself doing nothing but starting over.
I shall remember that. She smiled softly my way. I swiftly dried my face and nodded.
Somehow, I think you will.
We spoke of a few things as night fell. We talked about gossip. We talked about popular celebrities. She told me the names of a few famous musicians she had met. And once again, I cursed the stars for never having a chance to meet the legendary Octavia up close. As the night took a firmer hold, I decided to take my leave, or else risk the moon curtailing what had become a most gracious visit.
It's just as well. I really do need to get to work,
Rarity said. She had finished cleaning up the mess that an angry doppelganger of herself had left in the center of the boutique hours earlier.
This one dress I'm working on won't finish itself after all.
I watched her trotting up to the half-made dress in question. Lingering in the doorframe to the boutique's exit, I exhaled the first wisps of vapor from my lips.
Will you ever be done working, Miss Rarity? Will you ever finish?
That's up to the industry to decide. The tone in her voice was threadbare, like so many materials gathering dust in the far corners of that place. Perhaps she was talking to no pony all along. What does this one need? Her voice rang in the direction of the gown. It has lace. It has emerald. A sigh rose across the room, colored with a pale kiss of moonlight. More ribbon. The ringing bell above the door was deafening. It had been 3 weeks. I felt like an archaeologist stumbling upon a sacred temple, left abandoned for ages. My heart actually sank instead of danced when her singing voice spun across the morning light to welcome me.
Welcome to the Carousel Boutique, where every garment is chic, unique, and magnifique. Hello,
I bit my lip, hesitated, and exhaled.
I'm just visiting town. I'm not looking for anything special, but...
I marched stiffly into the center of the place, already digging into my saddlebag. I produced the last stone, raising the dull thing up like it was an errant piece of lint. My head wouldn't stop hurting with the 8th elegy, but that morning I was too tired to cry.
I was wondering if you were skilled in the arts of gem enhancement.
As you can, see, this needs a lot of work.
Here, dear, let me take a look at it.
Rarity sashayed over from a jacket she was working on and took the gem from my grasp. She adjusted the spectacles on her eyes and hummed to herself.
Yes, it does seem as though it's been through quite a lot. It's rather unusual that I get requests to enchant old rocks, but the day I can no longer bring luster back to a jewel is the day I retire. I'm sure you have plenty more important things to do, but... Oh, nonsense, it's been a slow week.
She rolled her eyes.
Nothing to do but fiddle with a few drab sheets of wool and see if I can outdo the latest craze mailed in from Canterlot.
Honestly, she gave me the sweetest of smiles, which was no less elegant. You are the absolute highlight of my morning. Care to take a seat while I work?
It depends. How much do you think I have to give up?
Why, when you put it like that, dear, I'm tempted to ask for a lock of your firstborn's mane.
Ha! I don't know how Pinkie Pie does it.
She cleared her throat and marched over towards the metal brace positioned by the window.
In all seriousness, about 3 bits will do. This will only take a moment.
Much appreciated. Though I must say, I wish you would let me give you more time. She gazed up from where she was fixing the gem into place and focusing the sunlight through her containment field. Her eyelashes batted like one of those fairy tale fillies as she chirped forth,
You have a very, utilitarian outfit there, darling. But I must say it looks positively worn in.
I have the good mind to fix you a new sweater, one that could warm the eyes of others while it warms you, if you catch my meaning.
Thanks, but no thanks. You're very generous, but I
stopped immediately. The dryness in my throat left me as I saw the jacket that Rarity had been working on. I saw the fine seams woven intricately in floral designs across the pockets. I saw layer upon layer of fabric forming a mesh of beatific color blend. It occurred to me, like a spontaneous burst of inspiration, that a pony with nothing to lose is a pony with everything to give. It may not have been my destined time in the spotlight, but I wasn't about to back down from an idea so beautiful that I immediately knew it deserved an encore.
Yes, please.
Rarity glanced up, somewhat surprised, from the menial task she was doing for me. "I beg your pardon." I looked towards her, smiling gently. "Yes, I would like it if you made me something new to wear. Something warm, but fabulous." Rarity blinked. With her eyes reopened, they not only shined, but positively sparkled. "Oh, yes, but of course." Her breaths were like cosmic bursts that carried her, skipping foolishly my way. "Oh, it's been ages since I've made anything for a mare with a green coat, especially one as bright and shiny as yours. What about a new sweater jacket? This time with a shiny gold seam running down the sides. Or perhaps a fancy yellow scarf. Oh, but of course, a gorgeous red sweater with amber bands to match your eyes. It positively screams housewarming." She suddenly clamped a pair of hooves over her lips. "Oh, my heavens, listen to me go on. You must have your own idea in mind, of course." "No," I breathed, slowly shaking my head. "I couldn't possibly think up something as marvelous as you could. Design whatever you want." She gasped sharply, her features illuminating like the sun itself. "Really? Do you truly mean it?" I grinned wide at her. "Thrill me." So I carried on and on quite melodramatically, insisting that the brazen canines had attempted comparing me to a mule. I put up quite a show, if I do say so myself. If it wasn't the act of deep horror that I was portraying, then perhaps it was the sheer volume of my whining voice that finally broke their brutish resolve. They ceased their attempts to enslave me into jewel-finding. I had just about freed myself from those terrestrial ruffians' clutches. "How do the sleeves feel? Too tight?" "No, Miss Rarity," I replied, sitting on a pedestal as she circled around me. A sea of sewing utensil levitated all around her latest work of art, a bright and colorful sweater adorning my turquoise limbs. "The measurements were right the first time." "Are you certain of that, darling?" She tilted my forelimbs up and down, closely eyeing where the material of the sleeves grew taut. "You haven't stopped shivering since I began. Is the sweater not giving you enough insulation? If so, I should fix that from the start before I let myself go with the aesthetics." "Trust me." I smiled up at her as soon as her face entered my peripheral vision. "I'm going to be absolutely fine. I'm loving this sweater already." "Well, that does make two of us." She stifled a tiny squeal and began tightening the cuffs at the end of one sleeve. "I haven't had a chance to work with my talents this freely in ages. I do apologize for it taking so long. Perfection and genius seldom go tango when instead they can waltz." "Take as much time as you need, Miss Rarity," I said. "You were going on about the diamond dogs?" "Oh, yes. Would you like to know a secret?" "Sure. Why not?" "Well, I informed all of my friends that I simply relied on the refined talents of a lady dissuading those brutes' demands. As a matter of fact, that's only partially true. It so happens that my family has dealt with diamond dogs before, and I knew well in advance how to take advantage of their, how shall we put it? Yes, pathetic simple-mindedness." I giggled. "You don't say." "Oh, but I do." She fiddled and worked and painted a linen canvas all around me. As a matter of fact, it was the poor fortune of my great-great-grandmother, an aristocratic mare named Ruby Joy, to have stumbled on an entire colony of these digging mutts. However, she was a very calm and intelligent lady, and soon she had not only all of the dogs eating out of her hoof, but she also got them to fetch a gigantic note of diamonds and carry them home to my ancestors' dwelling in Chicago. Just where do you think my family's affinity for rare rocks got its start? I smiled. I listened to her. I modeled for her. And for a blissful afternoon, I didn't think one bit about the future. After all, it takes a curse to make generosity truly, truly delicious. The things that I've grown most thankful for in life are the things that come at me by surprise, like a spotlight out of nowhere. Who's to know how much opportunity we'll have to shine in this life? So long as we can help it, we must never let ourselves become dull. Such is the core not only of the industry of this life, but also the art of it. Until next time fate weaves our threads together, I am Lyra Heartstrings, and this is my legacy.